caught my cheating wife and her sister's husband in a shocking act, leading to an explosive revenge. The internet changed how we lived. Suddenly, everyone wanted a computer, including my family. We finally got one a couple of years back. Initially, it was a novelty. My wife used it for email and games, while the kids used it for homework and gaming. I browsed the web and watched adult content. I often worked late, leaving the factory at midnight. Unlike many guys, I headed straight home. Alone in the quiet house, I'd sit at the computer. Eventually, I got bored and started reading stories online. I became intrigued by tales of infidelity. These stories made me suspicious of my wife. I started scrutinizing her behavior, even arguing with her. Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake my doubts. I read less over time, but the thoughts lingered. I even wondered about my own reactions if I caught her cheating. Would it turn me on? Discussing this with Deb only led to more questions. Our relationship had begun innocently enough, but doubt crept in. Deb's sister Sandy had a reputation for promiscuity. Though I'd been wild in my youth too, Sandy's behavior was on another level. Her carnal exploits were well known, including involvement in ménage à trois. I knew Bob from work. He was a day shift supervisor who got transferred. He invited me to his wedding with Sandy, who was just as wild as him. I wasn't fond of Bob because of his behavior toward Deb. Despite Deb's reassurances, I made it clear I'd protect her from him. We agreed to keep our past relationships private due to jealousy. Our conflicting work schedules strained our marriage. I didn't want to encounter someone Deb had slept with, nor did I want to admit I had been with her sister when our kids were young. Despite our differences, we managed to get along, though we didn't see each other much. Deb asked me to fix Sandy's leaking sink, knowing Bob was useless with repairs. I promised to take care of it on my way to work. While I worked, thoughts of Sandy's lifestyle as a possible wanton lingered, fueled by Bob's revelations. Despite Sandy's advances, I joked to keep things light. She didn't tempt me enough to risk my marriage. Arriving at Sandy's house, she greeted me provocatively. As I fixed the clog caused by eggshells and potato peels, Sandy hovered nearby, emphasizing her availability. "What are you doing, Sandy?" "I want you to stop it," I said. "I'm trying to finish this job." She paused briefly, allowing me to complete the task. When I stood up, she persisted. "Are you going to sleep with me now?" "No, Sandy, I can't do that. Deb is your sister and I love her. I won't cheat on her, especially not with her sister." "Have you forgotten how it was in high school? Are you too good to sleep with me now?" "Sandy, please. I love Deb. She doesn't know about our past together unless you tell her. You're a beautiful woman. But I love Deb." "You foolish man. Either you'll sleep with me or I'll tell Deb you did it anyway. She'll believe me. After all, I'm her sister." "Why are you doing this? Why hurt us? Deb is your sister and she loves you." Sandy laughed. "My innocent sister thinks she's perfect. Let's see how she reacts when I spill the truth." "Sandy, don't do this. I won't have sex with you, and I'll tell Deb about our past in school. I know she'll understand." Grabbing my tools, I declared, "I'm finished with your sink." I left in my truck, my mind racing. Would Sandy lie to Deb? At work, I tried calling Deb, but she wasn't home. I left a message expressing my love and the need to talk about her sister. The day dragged on with my thoughts consumed by the impending conversation. By evening, I called home again, but no one answered. Deb had left with Sandy and Bob, leaving the kids with me. I decided to keep them overnight. "Is something wrong?" Ray asked Deb's mom. "No, it's okay. If you see her, tell her I love her, and I'll see her tonight. I have to get back to work." For me, it was one of the longest nights. I knew I had to confess about Sandy before I met Deb. Finally, my workday ended, and I headed home, bracing myself for the inevitable conversation. Pulling up to the house, I noticed Sandy's car parked in the driveway, signaling an imminent confrontation. Unlocking the door, I was met with a shocking sight: my wife, Deb, Bob, and Sandy in compromising positions. Anger surged through me as chaos erupted. Waking up in the hospital, I found Patrolman G. Andrews by my side, explaining the events that had led to my injury. Confusion clouded my mind as I tried to make sense of the situation. "I see you're conscious now. I'm Patrolman G. Andrews. Where am I? And where's my wife? What happened?" "Take it easy, Mr. Harper. You have a concussion from a blow to the head with a glass vase. There was a fight at your home, and though charges were initially considered, they've been dropped. You're lucky. It could have meant 18 months in jail." "What about the attack on me? Witnesses say you were in a scuffle with your brother-in-law when his wife intervened, hitting you with the vase to stop the fight. It was a single blow to halt the altercation. You should be grateful the charges were dismissed. Where was my wife during all this? When we arrived, she was ill from excessive drinking. According to your sister-in-law, you became upset with her. leading to a confrontation with your brother-in-law, who was trying to protect her. Your wife doesn't recall much, only that there was shouting. If the charges are dropped, why are you here? My supervisor called when you weren't home yet and instructed me to wait for your statement. So what happened? I asked. I have nothing to say. I wasn't going to broadcast that I found my wife with another man. I just lay there and said nothing. Okay, it's your call. The doctor says you'll need to stay until tomorrow. Consider yourself fortunate no charges were pressed. You're lucky, Mr. Harper. The officer departed, leaving me with a pounding headache. What now? I couldn't bear the thought of living with a cheating wife, but I needed answers. I phoned my sister to pick me up the next day. I couldn't rely on Deb, not after this. As I waited for Amy to arrive, the phone rang. It was Deb. Should I come get you? We need to talk. Now that we're square. Square? What are you talking about? You cheated with Bob and you think we're even? Amy's on her way. I just want to grab my things and go. What do you mean leave? I was just evening the score for what you did, Deb retorted. I'm not discussing this over the phone. Amy and I will come to pick up my things, and we can talk then. I hung up and waited for Amy. She arrived shortly and drove to my house. I asked her to wait in the car to avoid any conflict. Knocking on the door, Deb answered. I inquired about the kids, and she mentioned they were at her mom's. Beginning the conversation, I addressed her response to my message. Did you listen to my voicemail? Yes, Sandy claimed you coerced her into having sex. How could you? I didn't do that. That's why I left the message. I went to fix her plumbing, and she made advances. I refused, but she persisted, threatening to lie to you about us. I don't believe you. She wouldn't lie to me. She's envious of our marriage and wanted to break us apart. Letting Bob sleep with you was part of their swinging lifestyle. They got what they wanted, and our marriage suffered. No, that's false. I did it for revenge. You assaulted my sister, so I slept with Bob to even the score. Sandy even knew physical details about you, like your uncircumcised state and the mole on your upper thigh. Your sister is promiscuous. She knew because I was involved with her in high school like many others. I kept it from you because I liked you and didn't want to jeopardize our relationship. Then you said we should bury our past. I'm unsure what to believe. Sandy is my sister, and you're my husband. Instead of asking me, you let Bob, did you really think raping your sister would fix things? You must have wanted him badly to believe them. But Sandy's claims, I don't care what your sister says. It's not just about Bob. It's about you not trusting me enough to discuss the accusations. If I had assaulted her, why didn't she report it? She didn't want to cause a family scandal. But she had no qualms about involving the police last night. She didn't cry assault because it didn't happen. You can believe whoever, but this marriage is over. Why would you want to be with a rapist? No, you desired Bob and used me as an excuse. That's not true. I love you. Look up love. It doesn't involve sleeping with others. I'll grab my things now and see you next week for the rest. I'm consulting a lawyer Monday to start the divorce process. Ray, hold on. This isn't how it was planned. Sandy said she forgave you and you'd forgive me. I only wanted revenge. No, you slept with Bob and your sister. I grabbed my suitcase, packing a few things. What about the kids? Tell them what you want. I'm done with this. I'll arrange visits through a lawyer, and Amy can help with the kids. I don't want to speak to you again. I left. Amy drove me to a budget motel. On the way, I told her everything. She knew I was truthful. Weeks passed. It was tough. I worked extra for expenses, found a cheap place, and ate out mostly. In the divorce, assets were split equally. Child support didn't bother me. I love my kids. I missed Deb, but I knew it was over. I attended school events, avoiding Deb's family. I saw my kids weekly. Deb called often. I listened about the kids, but hung up when she brought up us. I visited Amy's for dinner and played with the kids. Sandy stuck to her story, leaving Deb torn. I had no proof. It was my word against Sandy's. Deb believed her, which hurt the most. One afternoon, the school called saying Kyle wasn't well. I fetched him and found he had a cold. I informed Deb, who taught middle school, and she said she'd come home soon. After checking Kyle's temperature, which was slightly elevated, I waited with him. An hour later, Debbie arrived. As she went to check on Kyle, the phone rang. Without thinking, I answered. It was Sandy. What are you doing there? She asked. Well, look who's calling the shots. Kyle was sick, so I brought him home. Thanks for ruining our marriage. I recorded the conversation, forgetting the answering machine was on. Is he okay? Why do you care? You're the reason his parents split. Ray, things got out of hand. You knew we were wanton, and Bob wanted your wife. If you had just slept with me, none of this would have happened. But instead, you came home and started a fight. You accused me of assault and made Bob assault Deb. What kind of sister are you? Bob didn't force her. She willingly slept with him, and she'd probably do it again. She was drunk, and you filled her head with lies, then watched your husband violate her. Ray, you can't prove anything. I warned you Deb would believe me. If you need some action, call me. Tell Deb to ring me later. Hope Kyle feels better. She hung up, and I turned off the recorder. Debbie asked who called, and I told her it was Sandy, her angel sister who never lies. What'd she want? Deb asked. I recorded her message. She said to call her back. See you in court Thursday. I guess it's our Freedom Day. Don't forget to listen to the message, I said, heading to my truck. My phone rang persistently on the way home about 10 times. When I finally answered, it was Debbie, apologizing, claiming Sandy told her the truth about not being assaulted. Good to know, but it doesn't change my mind. You slept with Bob without giving me a chance to explain. Despite telling you the truth, you chose your sister's tale, thinking I was a rapist. I loved you, maybe always will, but I also hate you for what you did to our family and the distrust you had for me. On Thursday, I took 2 days off work, signed the divorce petition at my attorney's office, and left before Deb arrived. Depressed, I went to the neighborhood bar where I saw Bob. Without hesitation, I punched him repeatedly until I was pulled away by others. Dragged off by the police, I was taken to jail. I made one call, reaching out to my sister Amy. I confessed my actions and insisted she shouldn't post bail. I'd face my sentence. Tears flowed when we hung up. Debbie tried to visit me in prison, but I declined to see her. Nearly 2 months later, my case went to court. I pleaded guilty to assault and received a 2-year sentence, minus time served. Amy stored my belongings, informing me that Debbie was unwell and wished to see me. I refused. Deb truly loves you. Her family is furious about Sandy's accusations. Also, Debbie never showed up to sign the divorce papers, so legally you're still married, Amy informed me. Prison life was harsh, fights were routine, and I had to earn respect. My cellmate, Keeler, was a lifer with a violent past. Despite our rough start, he eventually opened up to me. Then, surprisingly, Debbie visited me one day. What brings you here? I questioned, feigning anger, though she looked lovely and tender. Ray, I still love you. I've made mistakes, she confessed, offering me photos of our kids, tears streaming down her face. I've moved on. Take care of our kids, I replied, receiving the pictures. I didn't finalize the divorce. I'll wait for you, no matter how long, she pleaded. I felt torn. Despite her mistakes, I still loved her. Leaving her by the window, I walked back to my cell. In the kitchen, I overheard plans to confront Keeler. Without being a snitch, I informed him, hoping to save a life. The next day, unsure if Keeler believed me, I stood my ground. He assured me he'd handle it discreetly, earning my gratitude. He concealed 2 books under his shirt, shielding his kidneys. Across from him, 3 allies sat at a nearby table. As the attacker approached and lunged with a knife, Keeler remained composed. The blade struck the books, its dullness preventing penetration. Keeler's comrades subdued the assailant until guards intervened. The attacker was isolated, while Keeler resumed his meal unfazed. It was astonishing how Keeler remained composed. He confided in me regularly after the incident. Despite his tough exterior, he was a different person behind bars. Keeler inquired about my family, sharing his own story of estrangement. His daughter, Angie, remained loyal, though he protected her from prison life. He cherished her deeply, proud of her career as a lawyer. I recounted my ordeal with Sandy and Debbie to Keeler. Do you still love her? He asked. Yes, but I can't forgive her, I replied. Keeler urged me not to hold on to grudges, sharing his own regrets. His words left me pondering my future upon release. Without a job or family, what would I do? The following month, Debbie visited me again, her eyes teary but smiling. She handed me drawings from the kids, portraying us as a family. They miss you, Ray, and I miss you terribly. Can you forgive me? Can we rebuild our family? I've cut ties with Sandy and Bob. I regret not trusting you, she confessed. Doubt lingered. Would she believe me if faced with accusations again? Deb, I want to forgive you, but it's hard. Seeing you with Bob is etched in my mind. Did you have feelings for him? No, I despised it. I felt sick when you walked in. I regret my actions deeply. I only want you, Ray, the father of our children, she pleaded. Weeks later, Amy visited with unsettling news. I saw Sandy and Bob together at the house. I don't know why. I thought you should know. Confusion swirled. Had Deb lied again? I was ready to forgive, but now I doubted her honesty. I needed to understand why Deb was reconnecting with Sandy and Bob. A month later, Keeler and I spoke, and he expressed gratitude for my past help. A former lawyer, he offered to leverage his connections to potentially secure my release from parole. Though uncertain, I trusted him. Keeler's integrity stood firm, despite his criminal background. I respected his stature and refrained from probing further, choosing to accept his word. A few weeks later, I was summoned to the warden's office for the parole board meeting. The prison governor was the first to address me. "Mr. Harper, we have a parole application for you. After reviewing your file, we noted your initial struggle to adjust. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir. I found prison life challenging, but I tried to adapt." "If released early, where would you live and work?" the governor asked. I had to think quickly, realizing the importance of my response. "Well, sir, my sister and her husband offered me a place to stay, and my previous employer expressed willingness to rehire me." "Aren't you married, Mr. Harper?" "Yes, sir, but we were in the process of divorce when I was sentenced. I'm uncertain about our future." "We appreciate your candor. We knew about your marital status and wanted to gauge your honesty. Regarding recidivism, we're cautious about early releases. I assure you I'm committed to staying out of prison. Return to your cell, Mr. Harper. We'll notify you of our decision by month's end." "Thank you, sir, for considering my parole." Back in the cell, Keeler inquired about the meeting. I shared my responses and asked if he had any involvement. "You never know, but if you're released early, I'll expect a weekly box of cigarettes on my account." He chuckled. A few days later, Debbie returned, mentioning a parole board representative had visited. "Are you getting paroled?" she inquired anxiously. "What did they say?" I nervously questioned. "They asked about our living arrangements and if you'd be staying here," she replied, adding, "I'd love to have you back." Changing the subject, I queried about her interactions with Sandy and Bob. "She's my sister. I don't see her much," she responded defensively. "And Bob?" I pressed. "Why all the questions?" she retorted, visibly uneasy. "You promised not to see Sandy, yet they were here together. Did something happen with Bob again?" "Tell him when I'm out, I'll settle things. And if you're having fun with him in the meantime, I'll deal with it," I asserted. Deb hastily exited the room, confirming my suspicions. I phoned my sister Amy, informing her of the encounter. She assured me of her support. "Did the parole board contact Mr. Parker about my job?" I inquired. "Yes, they did. He said you could return. You were one of his top employees," she reassured. "You've given me hope," I acknowledged gratefully. "They mentioned I'm likely to be released next month, considering I have a place to live and a job," she added tearfully. Amy's words buoyed my spirits. I received a call informing me of my upcoming release next week. They provided the name of the lawyer handling my case and instructed me to report to the agency promptly after my release. It puzzled me why I had to meet with a lawyer instead of a parole officer. However, I learned that the law firm facilitated my release, handling paperwork, explaining my parole terms, and arranging a meeting with a parole officer. I expressed gratitude to Keeler, remembering our agreement about the cigarettes. Regardless of his involvement in my parole, the prospect of freedom was worth a weekly box of cigarettes. As I stepped outside the gate, my sister Amy awaited me, tearfully. We shared a hug and a brotherly kiss. Inside Amy's house, her husband welcomed me warmly. Amy mentioned that Debbie, after consulting with a lawyer while I was incarcerated, had initiated the divorce proceedings. It seemed my suspicions about Deb were confirmed, yet now I was a free man. Knowing I needed to arrange visitation with my kids, I called Deb's house beforehand to ensure she was available. I clarified that I sought no trouble and suggested we discuss arrangements on her porch. Reluctantly, she agreed, warning of involving the police if there was any disturbance. As I arrived at the house, my children rushed to me, shouting, "Daddy, Daddy, you're back!" I embraced them tightly, feeling the depth of my longing for them. After a brief chat, I urged them to ride their bikes, recalling how their mother and I used to watch them from the porch. "Debbie, these kids are mine too. I want to be a part of their lives," I asserted, frustrated by her dismissive attitude. I was willing to forgive. But you went back to Bob and Sandy." "I won't tolerate exposing my children to their lifestyle," I warned sternly, emphasizing the seriousness of my intent. Debbie insisted she wouldn't subject the kids to that lifestyle and claimed she had changed. "Actions speak louder than words," I reminded her skeptically. After bidding my kids farewell, I discussed their well-being and promised to spend more time with them once I found a nearby apartment. As I left, a sense of unease settled over me, knowing I needed legal guidance in this complex situation. I hadn't spoken to the lawyer who secured my parole. Approaching the receptionist, I presented the card from the parole board. "May I see Mr. A.J. Brady, please? I have an appointment." "I'm Ray Harper," I stated. The receptionist assured me Brady would see me shortly and directed me to take a seat. While waiting, I wondered if she had said, "Miss Brady." The card indicated a J. Brady, so I assumed it was a man. Lost in thought, I was taken aback when a stunning woman in a dark blue suit approached. She greeted me with a smile, dimples, and shoulder-length dark hair. As she extended her hand for a handshake, she introduced herself as a J. Brady. "Ray Harper, I presume?" she said. "I've been asked to review your case. From what I've gathered, you didn't receive fair representation. Let's discuss further in my office," she added, instructing the receptionist to hold calls. "Yes, Miss Brady," the receptionist responded. I followed her into her office. If she had asked, I would have followed her anywhere. She was strikingly beautiful. "Well, Mr. Harper, we finally meet," she said. "Please call me Ray," I replied gratefully. "I owe you my life, but I'm curious, why me?" "A friend of mine asked me to look into your case," she explained. "Your lawyer failed to mention key details like your recent divorce and extenuating circumstances. I presented these to the parole board, who agreed your sentence was excessive." "Why me, Miss Brady? Who hired you? Can I call you a J?" I inquired. "Look, Ray, a friend asked for my help, and I delivered. Knowing who hired me isn't crucial, and yes, you can call me a J," she replied. "There are some things we need to discuss," she added. "Would you join me for lunch?" I asked. "I don't usually meet clients outside the office," she replied. "It's not a date, just lunch," I clarified. "All right, Ray, let's call it a business meeting over lunch," she agreed, flashing a smile. "I'll let Mary know we're leaving, and then we can go." I watched her rise. She exuded a rare blend of charm and professionalism for a lawyer. We dined at a tranquil restaurant. Over lunch, she briefed me on meeting my parole officer, regular visits, adherence to rules, and staying clear of trouble. "Angie, share something about yourself," I requested. "Ray, discussing my personal life with a client wouldn't be appropriate," she responded. "Your smile is captivating," I complimented, prompting her to blush. "Tell me about your legal background," I persisted. She revealed her scholarship, acquired law degree, and experience in criminal law. As we ate, Angie lingered in my thoughts. "Will I see you again?" I inquired. "Return next week for paperwork with your parole officer. We can have lunch then," she agreed, softening slightly. After lunch, we returned to the office. When she extended her hand, I held it briefly, pondering her thoughts. We bid farewell, and I eagerly anticipated our next lunch. Her secretary's smile hinted at the rarity of such interactions, a testament to Angie's uniqueness. I returned to work, swiftly completing tasks as if it were second nature. My colleagues seemed to regard me with newfound respect, and no one dared to challenge me. For 2 consecutive Mondays, I met with Angie, initially maintaining a professional relationship. However, by the 4th week, she informed me that our business collaboration had ceased. "Are you still my lawyer?" I inquired. "Certainly. Call me if you encounter any issues," she assured. "Angie, I regret to inform you that I must terminate our arrangement," I confessed. "Terminate? After all I've done to assist you?" she exclaimed. "Yes. I desire more than a professional connection. I want to take you on a genuine date, get to know you better," I expressed. "Ray, I'm conflicted. There's an attraction, but what will people think?" she pondered. "I don't care about perceptions. Just join me once. If it doesn't feel right, we won't repeat it." "Let's follow our hearts," I urged. After hesitation, she reluctantly agreed. "I'll go, but don't expect anything more," she cautioned. Surprised by her own words, Angie agreed. On Saturday, we took a drive. I borrowed a car from my sister, opting not to use my old truck. Arriving at her townhouse, I was greeted by a stunning woman as she opened the door. Despite individual perceptions, to me, she appeared breathtaking. Resisting the urge to embrace her immediately, I reminded myself to act as a gentleman, though it wasn't easy. At a fancy restaurant, we enjoyed wine followed by dinner. Afterward, we conversed while listening to music. "Angie, tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up? I noticed your last name differs from your father's," I inquired. "You know my story, Ray. My parents' relationship was troubled, ending in my father's incarceration for the past 14 years. Raised by extended family, I, the youngest, was only 14 when it all unfolded. It was a difficult time. Despite loving him, my siblings couldn't forgive our father for his actions. I harbored guilt for revealing my mother's infidelity to him. Perhaps if I had stayed silent, things might have been different," Angie confessed. "Angie, you shouldn't blame yourself for your mom's deceit or your dad's imprisonment. You were just a child trying to do the right thing," I reassured her. After my father was incarcerated, I resolved to attend college and pursue a career in law, hoping to assist him with a lighter sentence. That's why I specialized in criminal law. Despite my efforts, there wasn't much I could do for him, Angie explained. "As for your question about my marital status, I wasn't married long, and it's not something I want to discuss," she replied with a smile. "Ray, can we table this conversation for another time? I'm enjoying our evening together, and I'd rather not dwell on these topics. Would you like to dance? She suggested. I'm not much of a dancer, but I'd love to hold you close, I responded. As we danced, I embraced Angie, cherishing the moment. Ray, I have trust issues, especially with men, due to my social circles. I'm just being upfront with you. If it weren't for my father's intervention, I might not have agreed to this date, Angie admitted. I'll make sure to send your father some extra cigarettes, I joked. Angie, you mean a lot to me, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust. If I overstep, just let me know, and I'll respect your boundaries, I promised. When I dropped her off that night, I kissed her at the door, leaving her in silence. She kissed me again and leaned back. Can I come in, Angie? Not today, Ray. It's too soon. Maybe next Saturday. That could work. Give me a call on Thursday. I returned home filled with happiness. We got together the next 2 Saturdays. During our time together, she opened up more. Ray, I want you to know me better if we're going to keep seeing each other. I won't hide anything. I've been married before, as I mentioned. It happened during my freshman year of college. My boyfriend and I thought we were in love, so we got married after I got pregnant. But we soon realized we were too young, and the marriage failed. I had a miscarriage, and we ended up divorcing. I kept the last name Brady to distance myself from my maiden name, Miller, as my father insisted. I felt relieved that she trusted me with her story. She asked about my kids, expressing interest in meeting them. I had already told them about her, and my daughter was eager to meet her. Angie, would you like to join us? My sister is hosting a family barbecue next Saturday, and you're invited. It would mean a lot to me if you came. I knew it was a significant step for us. She avoided eye contact, indicating she understood the importance of this invitation. After a deep breath, she looked at me and kissed me passionately, a first for us. Pulling back, she took another breath. Okay, Ray, I'll come. What can I bring? I wasn't sure what women typically brought to these gatherings, so I suggested Amy could discuss it with her. When I informed Amy about Angie attending the party, the guest list expanded. Everyone wanted to meet her. My parents, cousins, aunts, and uncles all showed up. Angie offered to make potato salad. Amy mentioned how sweet Angie sounded on the phone, hinting at her hopes for our relationship. Every weekend, I visited Deb's house to pick up my kids. We'd either hang out at Amy's or do something fun together. I asked about their mother respectfully. Kyle mentioned she was dating a man, which concerned me initially, but Kayla reassured me he was their school teacher named Pat. He had lost his wife to leukemia and had moved to start anew. He had a daughter their age, whom Kyle and Kayla liked. I need to tell you something, Deb. Your deceit and infidelity destroyed us. If you value this man, treat him right. Most importantly, be truthful with him. Don't repeat the same mistakes you made with us.
Pat cares for our children and treats them well.
He's aware of your existence and acknowledges you as their father. I hope things work out for us. I hope I haven't tarnished your future relationships, Ray. You're a decent man, and I believe you'll find the right partner. I'm just sorry for the pain I caused you, Deb said, sounding sincere. After bidding farewell, I drove home. I rented a small apartment about a mile from Deb and the kids. I opted for a 2-bedroom place so the kids would have a spot when they were with me. I still swung by Amy's a couple of times a week, usually for a meal, but I enjoyed visiting them too. As the barbecue day arrived, I felt anxious. Waiting outside, I felt immense relief seeing Angie's car pull up. She greeted me with a smile, offering a bowl of potato salad. Make sure to have some, she teased. She looked stunning. I couldn't see her any other way. Being with her made me feel elated. I realized I had fallen for her, even though we'd only shared kisses. Some things you just know. I hoped she felt something for me too. Introducing her as my good friend, I watched as she mingled with everyone. Mom and Dad instantly took a liking to her. Dad even quipped, "Don't let her get away, Ray. We already adore her and we barely know her." Angie glanced at me and smiled. When I introduced her to Amy, their mutual glance seemed like positive reinforcement. Ray, I never mentioned this, but I encountered your sister during the parole interviews. I didn't bring it up as it wasn't relevant until now. I never anticipated we'd become acquaintances. I assured you of my honesty, which is why I'm disclosing this now. Amy and I hadn't communicated since your parole until she contacted me about the potato salad, Angie explained. Have you conversed with anyone else I should be aware of? Yes, I've spoken to Deb, your ex-wife Sandy, and Bob naturally. Additionally, I liaised with your employer to secure your position considering those involved in the bar incident and your arrest. I handled all of this as your legal representative. I never foresaw developing feelings for you, especially without meeting. I regret not divulging this earlier, but as your attorney, I needed to ascertain the truth before fully supporting you. If you want me to depart, please say so, and I'll oblige. Leave? Leave. All I heard was your declaration of love for me. I embraced her with a kiss, followed by a hug, and then introduced her to the rest of the family. I informed Angie I'd return shortly, as I needed to pick up the kids who were eager to meet her. Upon my return, Kayla approached and introduced herself to Angie. Hi, I'm Kayla. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? You're really pretty, just like Daddy said. Hi, Kayla. You can call me Angie or AJ. You're a very pretty girl, too. It's really nice to meet you. Kayla then said, come meet my older brother. He's 10 and a bit shy around girls. Kyle, this is AJ, Daddy's friend. I observed Kyle shaking Angie's hand. She knelt down to chat with the kids at their level. The way they interacted indicated they were likely to become friends. I joined them, and Kyle, not typically talkative, told me, we like her, Daddy. She's so pretty and sweet. Angie simply glanced at me and smiled. The barbecue was fantastic. As the evening progressed, while chatting with Angie, Kyle and Kayla approached us. Dad, remember you mentioned going to the amusement park in 2 weeks? Can Angie come with us? That way, when Kayla and I ride the attractions, you'll have someone to talk to. I attempted to convey to Kyle that such inquiries should be made in private. Angie might have other commitments or might not enjoy amusement parks. He glanced at Angie and apologized. Sorry, Angie, I didn't realize you weren't fond of amusement parks. Angie chuckled and knelt down, addressing Kyle. Sweetheart, what your daddy means is that those questions are better asked to him privately, not me. As for amusement parks, I adore them and would love to go if it's all right with your daddy. Perhaps you and I can enjoy the roller coaster together. Sure enough, we all headed to the amusement park, where the kids eagerly rode every attraction. Angie kept her promise to Kyle and rode the roller coaster with him, as well as the Ferris wheel. On our way back, Kayla remarked, Dad, you should get a car instead of your truck. Angie can't always use hers. We won't all fit in your truck. We chuckled at Kayla's observation, realizing she was correct. Over the following weeks, I didn't see much of Angie. Work kept me busy on weekends, and she had court obligations. Although we spoke on the phone occasionally, it wasn't the same. One Saturday, I picked up the kids, and we decided to visit Chuck E. Cheese's, a pizza place with various games and prizes. After arriving home, Kayla asked if she could invite Angie to join us. Not wanting to disappoint her, I agreed to call Angie. Angie, I called out. It's Ray. Kayla wanted me to give you a call. Any plans for tonight? Oh, hey, Ray. I was going out with some friends. Oh, okay. Have a great time then. Ray, you mentioned Kayla wanted to talk to me. Can you put her on the line, please? It's all right, Angie. Sure, that'd be nice. Could you pass the phone to Kayla? I could only hear one side of the conversation. Hey, Angie. Dad's taking Kyle and me to Chuck E. Cheese's for pizza and games. We thought you might want to join us. Yeah? Okay, I'll let him know. We miss you too. All right, bye. I felt bad for Kayla. I'm sorry, honey, but Angie already has plans. What do you mean, Dad? She said she'd be here in half an hour. She mentioned she's getting a car so she doesn't always have to use hers. Yeah, Daddy. She said she misses us. Later that evening, after we returned from a pizza party where the kids won a bunch of stuffed animals thanks to Angie's skills at the games, I dropped them off at their mom's house. Angie expressed her desire for us to get to know each other better. We headed to my apartment and settled on the couch. Angie, you know I care about you, right? I wouldn't be here if I didn't. I want to be engaged with you. I haven't trusted a man in a long time. All I ask is for you to be gentle and caring. I don't want to feel used. I want to feel loved. We began on the couch and eventually moved to the bedroom, indulging in whatever pleased us. I pampered her feet with massages, licked whipped cream off her stomach, and explored every sensation. We spent hours caressing, massaging, and expressing our love. Holding her in my arms after making love was when I felt most content. It was comforting to cuddle and feel her close to me, something I hadn't experienced in a long while. She ended up staying the entire night. I rose before her and prepared French toast for us. Emerging from the bedroom, she wore one of my t-shirts, which looked particularly fetching on her. I couldn't help but express my admiration for how wonderful she looked, even in the morning. After a quick shower, we sat down to talk. Angie, what do you envision for our future? You know how much I love you, and my children and family adore you. What are your thoughts on what comes next? Ray, I feel like I'm sounding like a lawyer. We've only known each other for a few months, and last night was our first time making love. I understand it's early, but I want you in my life every day. If we haven't had our fill of love, we can return to the bedroom and spend the whole day there. Angie smiled at the suggestion. Angie, I want you to be my wife. Will you marry me? Tears welled in Angie's eyes. Ray, I want you to know I don't take love lightly. I've made mistakes before, as I've told you. Yes, I will marry you. I promise to always be there for you and the kids. I know the pain of your past marriage, and I vow to be honest and faithful. I expect the same from you." She leaned in and kissed me passionately. "Honey, what's on your mind?" "You seem happy yet sad," I inquired. "These are my reflections on my dad and how joyful he will be." Many young girls dream of their special wedding day, envisioning themselves in a white dress escorted down the aisle by their father to meet their future spouse. I realize that won't be my reality, and it saddens me deeply. She shed quiet tears. "Last time, my father wasn't even aware of my wedding. By the time I reached out to him, I had suffered a miscarriage and was on the path to divorce. I'm sorry, Ray. I shouldn't dwell on this now. After all, I'm marrying the man my father approves of, the one I've loved since our first meeting." "What, you loved me from the start?" "I've wanted you since I laid eyes on you, but I guess you already knew that," I remarked, surprised. She gave me a sweet smile and asked when I wanted to set the date. I responded that it was entirely up to her. We both agreed it should happen as soon as possible. I asked if I could start spreading the news, and she said she would do the same. We just needed to settle on a date. We settled on 2 months from then. For the next few days, I was elated. I shared the news with Amy and her husband, Kenny, who were thrilled for us. I needed to inform the kids. I called their home and connected with them both through the console so I could share the news simultaneously. They both exclaimed their happiness and expressed their fondness for Angie. I assured them it was happening in a couple of months and that they were among the first to know. When I entered Angie's office, her secretary Mary congratulated me. She informed me that Angie had already spread the news, invited everyone to the wedding reception. Mary then called Angie and beckoned me in. Angie was waiting, tears silently streaming down her face. "What's wrong, Angie?" I called the prison, spoke to the warden, and requested a day's leave for my dad to attend our wedding. He informed me that my dad is prohibited from leaving the prison under any circumstances. His life sentence is final. He expressed regret but said there was nothing he could do. "I'm deeply sorry, Angie. I understand how much your father's presence means to you." "It's deteriorating, Ray. Despite being in remission, Dad's cancer has resurfaced. He has 3 to 6 months left." Tears welled in her eyes, and I enveloped her in my arms. "Why, Lord? Why put her through this? She's a good soul." My heart ached for her. "Angie, I've been buying cigarettes for your dad since I got out. It was a deal between us, I'm sorry." "It's not your fault. Dad doesn't smoke anymore. He uses the packs sent to him to trade with other inmates." "You didn't cause his cancer," Angie assured. An idea sparked in my mind, but I hesitated to share it with Angie, not wanting to extinguish her hope. I kissed her goodbye, promising to see her the next day. I skipped work and headed to the prison to meet Keeler and the warden. Keeler greeted me with a smile. "You take care of my girl, Ray. Just make her happy. She deserves better than what life's thrown her way." I pitched my idea to Keeler, met with initial resistance, but eventually secured his agreement, pending the warden's approval. I bid him farewell, heading to the warden's office. The warden welcomed me. "Well, Ray, I see you're staying composed and getting hitched. Sorry about Keeler, but as a lifer, we can't release him for his daughter's wedding." "Warden, are you fully in charge here, making most decisions? What's your angle, Ray? Can we hold the wedding on the prison premises? Use the chapel, and Keeler can walk his daughter down the aisle."
You want to marry here in prison just so her father can attend?
"Is that it?" "Yes, sir. She hasn't seen him in over 14 years, and he's nearing the end of the road. We only need the chapel for the ceremony. I know weddings have happened here before." "All right, Ray. I'll arrange it. Keep it small. You can invite 3 guests besides yourselves. Let Keeler bring some fellow inmates. You'll need a prison attendant." I expressed gratitude to the warden and hurried back to Keeler. "Dave," I called him by name, and he chuckled. The warden greenlighted the plan. "I'm off to tell Angie." "Thanks, Dave. It means the world to her." He smiled. "Ray, jot down this number," Keeler said, handing me a note. I noted it down for Angie. "When you visit the bank, ask Angie to bring her birth certificate. The account is registered under her maiden name," Keeler instructed. I expressed sympathy for Dave's illness. "Just look after my little girl. That's all I ask," he responded. Returning to Angie's office, she noticed my smile and inquired, "What's happening?" "You don't mind getting married in prison, do you?" I questioned. What's this about, Ray?" I recounted my conversation with the warden, mentioning that her father would be permitted to walk her down the aisle. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes. "God, I love you, Ray." I informed her about the safety deposit box, and we proceeded to inspect its contents. "I'm Angelina Juanita Miller, and I'd like to access my safety deposit box," Angie informed the attendant, who examined her birth certificate. He escorted us to the safe deposit box, unlocked it, and exited the room. The first thing we noticed was a note from her father. Dear Angie, if you're opening this box, it means you're either getting married or I've already passed away. I hope it's the former. In the little box is your mother's engagement ring. I know everyone wondered where it went, but I put it here for safekeeping. I want you to have it and wear it with pride. Your mother had her faults, but she loved you, and I know she would want you to have her wedding ring. There are also bonds here totaling over $115,000 that will help pay for your wedding. I formalized them before I was sent away. When you see your brother and sister, tell them there's a box for each of them too. If they haven't gotten theirs yet, only yours has a ring in it. Congratulations, and always be honest with your husband. With love, Daddy. Angie and I discussed our wedding plans, opting to invite her brother Brad and sister Lisa, along with my sister Amy. We plan to extend invitations to family and friends for the reception scheduled shortly after the ceremony. Angie and Amy dedicated the following month to preparing for the event, though it incurred additional expenses due to the short notice. However, I was determined to fulfill as much of Angie's dream as possible. Amy volunteered to capture the event with her digital camera. We visited Angie's siblings, where she introduced me to them. They clarified that while they didn't harbor animosity toward their father, they disapproved of his actions. Angie explained the significance of the wedding and the circumstances surrounding it, leading Brad and Lisa to tears upon learning of their father's terminal condition. After agreeing to attend, Angie provided them with their bank deposit box numbers, revealing their father's unexpected provisions. On the wedding day, Angie and I drove to the prison together, accompanied by Amy and her husband, who waited in the car. Upon our arrival, I arranged for a suit for Keeler, delivered by a guard, while I donned a rented tuxedo. Amy assisted Angie with her wedding attire in another room, as Angie preferred I not see her until the ceremony. Inside the chapel, I awaited Angie's entrance, alongside Brad and Lisa, who would serve as my best man and Angie's maid of honor, respectively. A prisoner played the piano, setting a solemn atmosphere, while additional prisoners, friends of Keeler, Dave, were seated. The warden, accompanied by the priest, announced refreshments after the ceremony, displaying unexpected kindness. As "Here Comes the Bride" filled the chapel, everyone rose to their feet. Angie entered, escorted by her father, tears streaming down both their faces. Angie's wish had been granted. Her father would walk her down the aisle on her wedding day. Once they reached the front, the audience took their seats, leaving only the small wedding party standing. Another guard entered and shut the door. The priest inquired, "Who presents this woman to marry this man?" "Yes, sir," Dave responded proudly before taking his seat. "Angelina Juanita Miller Brady. Do you accept Raymond Michael Harper as your husband?" the priest asked, proceeding with the ceremony. He posed the same question to me. We both solemnly affirmed our commitment to love and cherish each other from that day forward. After exchanging vows, I kissed the bride. Angie then embraced and kissed her father. We adjourned to an adjoining room to chat briefly and partake in cake and punch provided by the warden. Brad and Lisa approached their father, embracing him for the first time in nearly 15 years. Tears flowed, mingling joy with remorse. Aware of their father's terminal condition, they sought to reaffirm their love for him. Amy documented moments throughout the ceremony, capturing heartfelt interactions among Dave and his children. Her photos, encompassing tears, embraces, and even some laughter, were swiftly developed and enlarged at a 24-hour photo center. Expressing gratitude to Dave and the warden for fulfilling Angie's wish, we bid them farewell. As we departed, Brad and Lisa were still engaged in conversation with their father, a heartening sight. Returning to town for the reception, we were greeted enthusiastically by all our invited guests. Kyle and Kayla eagerly embraced us upon our arrival, their excitement palpable. Entering the auditorium, we were met with jubilant cheers. Tears welled in the eyes of my parents and nearly everyone who greeted us. Angie's friends, many unfamiliar to me, also welcomed us warmly. Notably, Mary approached, offering hugs of congratulations. Around 30 minutes later, Amy arrived with the photographs. She enlarged several of them and laid them out on a table for everyone to view. Brad and Lisa stopped by to collect their families. Brad was accompanied by his wife and 2 children, while Lisa was with her husband and 3 children. They all gathered around Dave's picture, explaining to the kids that he was their grandfather. Amy informed them that she had taken 4 sets of photos, and after the reception, each family would receive 1 set to take home. There was one for Brad and Lisa, one for Angie and me, and naturally, one for Amy. I must mention how stunning Angie looked in her wedding gown. If she had wings, she would have resembled an angel sent by God. She was the most exquisite woman I had ever seen, and now she was my wife. I believe most men feel similarly about their wives. We danced, dined, and danced some more, accompanied by the clinking of glasses. Our lips were practically inseparable throughout the evening. Colleagues at work told me I was incredibly fortunate, but trust me, I didn't need to be reminded. I knew I had found something precious, and I intended to cherish it forever. For those curious, Deb and Pat were absent from our wedding. It was Angie's special day, and I wanted nothing to mar it. Witnessing her and her father walking down the aisle, seeing her brother and sister reconcile with their father, and witnessing the family coming together once more, these are moments I will never forget. Update: it's been 6 months since our wedding. Debbie and Pat tied the knot last month. I'm glad to see Debbie making a genuine effort to turn her life around. My kids report that Pat is treating them well. I inquired about Aunt Sandy and Uncle Bob, and my kids informed me they relocated to another state. I transitioned to the day shift to spend more time with the kids and be home with Angie every night. Angie became pregnant with our baby 3 months after our wedding. Dave Keeler passed away. The kids visited him monthly until his passing. It was a somber moment, but we were able to share the news of Angie's pregnancy with him. We informed him it was a boy, and we planned to name him David Raymond. That brought a smile to Dave's face, reflecting on everything: the betrayal of my cheating wife, meeting the woman of my dreams in prison, and marrying her. I realize I'm starting anew and preparing to become a father once more. Not a day passes without me thanking God for all I have. I'm grateful for the opportunity He's given Angie and me to find happiness again. That's all. I called a family meeting to share that I'm seriously ill and might not have much time left. My brother and his wife decided to announce their pregnancy during it, and now they're upset. My brother and I are very close. His wife and I, not so much. We've had our fair share of tension. Anyway, I fell sick in the middle of May but held off getting checked out because of COVID and safety reasons. Eventually, when June started, I decided to go get it checked out. Turns out it was stage 2 breast cancer. I decided to tell my family 2 days ago since lockdown laws had been lifted, so I invited everyone over. When I told my brother and his wife, he said, "Okay, that's fine because I have news to share too." So our family gathered and my brother decided to go first. He did ask me, and he announced that his wife is 4 months pregnant. Of course, everyone was overjoyed. After about an hour, they asked about my news. I knew this was probably the last time in a long while before I had everyone here in person, so I told them. Of course, the initial joyous atmosphere was gone. The rest of the evening was filled with a lot of support for me and not much attention on my brother and his wife. My brother didn't seem to mind this, as he was quite distraught with my news, but I saw his wife was pretty upset and cornered off. So I decided to approach her, and I apologized for the timing of it all. She told me I could have waited a bit and Skyped everyone with the news, as it's just stage 2, and let my brother and her have this moment with their family. I told her I initially called this meeting for this exact reason, and she said she knows but that I knew my news would dampen everyone's mood. So I told her she's being ridiculous, and I wanted to tell my family in person since they are my family after all. She burst into tears and demanded to go home, which my brother obliged, even though he was confused. He promised he would come see me soon since he stays close by. Later that evening, I got a message from him asking if I told his wife that she isn't part of the family and that I deliberately wanted the attention on me, because that's what she's upset about. Also, the next day, my parents called me to check up on me, and my mom mentioned that my brother's wife called yesterday evening, really upset, telling them what I said and claiming I'm jealous because she's pregnant and I'm trying to ruin her life. I told my parents what actually happened and what I really said, and it's caused not only tension between his wife and me, but also between my parents and her. Now, she's also blaming me for my parents not being her biggest fans. My brother is torn but has been trying to talk to her, which results in more tears and a strain in their marriage. All this drama is making me think that I should have just called up everyone instead or just told my brother that his news had to wait, even though that would have been selfish of me. I really wanted my family's support that day, but I'm starting to rethink whether it was worth all this drama and potentially causing further problems. So, Reddit, edit, wow, I didn't expect this to get so much lovely feedback, and to think I was slightly scared to post this. Thank you all for the unwavering support, love, and hugs. I read and am still reading every single comment made, and I really appreciate it. I will most definitely fight through. Thank you all so much. Just wanted to add a few points. When my brother told me he had news too, he was really super excited and added it as a, "just by the way, I'll announce mine too." He did apologize and admit afterward that if he had known what my news was, he would have held off his because right now what's important is my recovery. He also admitted he wrongfully assumed that my news would automatically be good. I'm usually always the happy, chirpy one. His wife wasn't too fond of this either. My brother's wife also had a miscarriage at the beginning of the year, which is why this pregnancy, I suppose, was extra special. I'm truly happy for them. I just wish she could understand, like one user pointed out, that this isn't a competition. I don't know why I couldn't tell him over the phone. We are really close, and I knew it would have crushed him. I couldn't steal him away at the gathering either because he was the last to arrive, and when he did, he just quickly mentioned, "Hey OP, mind if I go first?" And I was frozen on the spot, so I said, "Sure." Also pretty silly on my part. It's hard to explain that feeling where you're absolutely frozen, and there's a big lump in your throat that prevents you from speaking. But saying that news in the first place was really difficult to begin with. Edit. Just another point to clarify, I'm not a saint, but my brother does mean a heck of a lot to me. It's exactly why his wife and I cleared the air between us before, because I wouldn't deliberately make his life hell by pissing her off. Hence why, when I saw she was upset, I approached her, and when she told me I could have Skyped, I responded with, I wanted to tell them in person since they are my family and they would probably want to be there with me when I broke the news. I never once implied she wasn't a part of it. My brother and parents know this. Update, sorry this is so late. A lot has been happening this past month since the news came out, and since I've received a tremendous amount of love from Reddit, I thought it would be only fair to let you all know what happened. First and foremost, I've started treatment, also one of the reasons I couldn't update sooner. Thank you all for your well wishes. I plan on bouncing back as soon as I can. Anyway, I could see that my brother was under a lot of stress, and I finally sat him down to talk about it properly. He showed me a bunch of texts that his wife sent him, telling him he's a shitty father for choosing me over his family. She said I was seeking attention and nobody cares about her, and one thing that really got to me was that she told him to choose once and for all, and if he picks me, he loses her and his child. And if he picks her, she doesn't want me in their lives at all. I felt terrible, not only for him but knowing that I could have prevented all this. I took the time to apologize for putting him in this position, and if I had just pulled him aside soon enough and given him a heads up, he would have truly understood. Brother tells me I shouldn't apologize because he should have been more considerate. He also mentioned that his wife would have probably still gotten mad at him whether they did or didn't give the news on that day. So I decided I should invite her over for coffee to sort out everything. I spoke to her alone. I asked her about everything. She was very cold and didn't really answer, so I started talking first by apologizing if I made her feel excluded from the family or that her pregnancy was of any less importance. I explained that I should have given them a heads up so we could have avoided what had happened altogether, and that was my fault, and that I was very sorry. But I also mentioned that the way she reacted and went to the extent of lying wasn't okay. She then started crying and vented out about how angry she's been, and that my brother always puts me first. And recently they've been going through a rough patch. When he sided with me, it made her even more upset and feel even more lonely. She admitted she lied to my parents and my brother, saying that she was hoping they would show her more sympathy. When they were cold to her, she got even more upset. After hours of talking, she apologized for how she acted and has been acting, and she would like it if we moved on from this. My brother came later and they both went home. He texted me saying they both spoke for hours and agreed to couples therapy. My parents are currently living with me and helping me out tremendously, but they are not quite happy with my sister-in-law yet, although they promised to try to work things out. Things finally seem to have calmed down, and let's hope it stays that way. None of this would have been possible without the feedback you all gave me, and I'm indebted to that, so thank you. Edit to add. All of you are so kind honestly, but I wanted to clarify that I'm no saint, nor am I selfless. I know what happened wasn't entirely on me. However, in order to focus solely on my recovery, I can't be stressed out about this whole situation and have all this tension around. Seeing my brother being put in that position and my sister-in-law, as hurtful as she was, being upset and holding hatred can affect her and the baby. I did what I could to fix things so that everyone can focus on being healthy and being positive without holding any grudges. I know I sure will. I know my sister-in-law, she can be very stubborn and unreasonable, and if I left things in her hands, I'm 99% sure it would have resulted in much, much worse circumstances than me putting the first hand forward. At least now I can focus on my recovery without any distress or toxicity. I'm human. I felt angry. I felt upset. Yeah, I wanted to give her a piece of my mind, but doing so isn't helping myself, her, my brother, or my family, only damaging things further. This realization is what prompted me to let it all go and focus on positivity and my mental and physical health. Last edit, I spent all day on Reddit reading every little or big comment made, and honestly, I didn't know you could feel so much support from people you've never met. You are all amazing humans. Thank you all for the upvotes, comments, and awards. I'll still read every single comment, but this will be my final edit. And for the people who asked, I'm 24.
The sound of dirt hitting the coffin had a muted tone, matching the gloomy day. I stood there, observing as the minister tried to offer comforting words to those grieving. Holding my daughter's hand, her husband stood just behind us, placing his hand on my shoulder to offer solace. My son stood next to me, with his girlfriend by his side. At 49 years old, I never anticipated that I'd be standing at a graveside, burying my wife. I always believed deep down that I'd be the first to pass away. Due to my work and the way I had lived my life, I thought I'd surely pass before my wife, and when that time came, I'd be an elderly man. I felt old, ancient. After the funeral, there was a reception. Everyone came up to me expressing their condolences and praising my wife's greatness, our wonderful relationship, and her youthful age. However, they didn't say what I needed to hear. We had been married for over 20 years with 2 kids, both now independent. My daughter is married and about to give me my first grandchild. My son works in New York City in the financial district, and both are doing well, with many people at our house. Well, I suppose it's now my house. I'm struggling to adjust to being single. For the past 20 years, everything has been ours, not mine. There were about 40 people around, talking and offering their support. I just wanted some time alone. Feeling quite fed up, I eventually slipped out into the backyard and made my way to the back gate, planning to take a short walk. As I closed the gate, someone drove up the alley and parked their car right next to where I was standing. It was Murray, my wife's younger sister, the last person I wanted to see at that moment. You see, I partly blamed Murray for my wife's passing away. Maybe that's not entirely fair to Murray or my wife, but in my heart, I knew that if Murray had kept her interest to herself, Brenda would still be here with me. I informed her that I was just going for a walk, mentioning that everyone was inside, and she had been brought up in conversation. I didn't smile, nor did I openly invite her. I just stated the facts as I saw them. I wanted to be away from there for sure, and I was certain Marie would try to invite herself on my walk. I should have known better, as she just brushed past me and went into the backyard. She had always been all about Murray. That's why when Murray took a sudden interest in Brenda's personal life, I became suspicious. It was out of character for her younger sister in many ways. I sighed, relieved to be free of her for the moment. There was a cloud hanging between us, and a divide that seemed insurmountable to me. Now, family or not, Murray was unwelcome around me. It's a long story about what happened, and how it all led to the funeral today. Life goes on like water in a river, always moving relentlessly forward. Okay, here is my story. This is what happened in my life. Brenda and I met after college at her workplace. I had gone to the insurance company where she worked to renew my home and car policies, and she was the agent assigned to me. I found myself finding excuses to go back after our first meeting, and somewhere along the way, I finally gathered the courage to ask her out. After several months of dating, we realized we were deeply in love with each other, so we got married. We had 2 children and a happy marriage. Until 2 years ago, I never questioned marrying Brenda. We were perfectly matched, like 2 peas in a pod. Then Murray became interested in Brenda's life. I'm sure she had good intentions. I believe Murray thought Brenda needed to branch out and grow. Everything a person could desire in someone trying to be better and more loving could be seen in Murray. She had been trying hard to help Brenda with what she saw as flaws. It began with Wednesday night girls' night out, and soon expanded to include Wednesdays and Fridays. Vincent got added to the mix. It seemed that after a while, Murray was spending more time with Brenda than I was. Of course, this was only true because Murray was taking advantage of Brenda's time when I would typically have been at home. Soon, it was all about Murray or Marie. When it became a daily occurrence, I started distancing myself from Brenda every time I tried to spend quality time with my wife. Marie seemed to be there whenever I wanted Brenda to be with me. Marie appeared more important every time I wanted to take Brenda out for dinner, often coinciding with one of the girls' nights. What had once been a communicative and open relationship became closed off and non-communicative. I couldn't express my feelings without upsetting Brenda and being accused of being hard and unfair to her younger sister. If all I was going to do was upset my wife by trying to be with her, why bother? A few months after the growing girls' night out trend began, I could see that my marriage was in serious trouble, yet I couldn't discuss it with my wife without her becoming defensive and angry. So I did the worst thing possible. I gave up. I spent my time doing what I wanted, and Brenda started doing her own thing. On our rare nights at home together, we felt like strangers living in the same house. Then one night, or rather it started the night before, everything fell apart. I was at home, working in the garage on a project. It was a Friday night, and Brenda and Murray had gone out for their regular Friday outing. They left the house around 6:30, and I found myself making my own supper, something I had been doing more often. Eating in the garage seemed simpler, so I prepared dinner and took it out there. Listening to my boombox as I worked and ate was soothing. I worked until 11 and then went inside. I half expected Brenda to be in bed already, but I was surprised to find she hadn't even come home yet. I noticed the phone's light flashing, indicating a new message. The message conveyed that my wife was staying at Murray's for the night because they had been out for a while, and it was too late for her to drive home safely. She mentioned she would see me in the morning and questioned the point of bothering. I couldn't help but think to myself that I rarely saw her anymore anyway, and suggested that she move in with her sister and find happiness there. I had to admit, I was upset and jealous. Murray's growing influence on my wife had led to my losing her, and I couldn't figure out how to win her back. I missed being with Brenda, our conversations, laughter, and the closeness we once shared. After listening to the message and deleting it, I overheard men's voices in the background. It seemed like a party was happening at Murray's house, with my wife there. I called Brenda's cell phone, but a man answered and mentioned she was occupied. He hung up when I told him I was her husband. I tried calling a few more times, growing increasingly frustrated. Eventually, I had enough and decided to drive over to Murray's. However, no one was home at her place. I then realized that I had dialed Brenda's cell phone, and I didn't know where she was or who she was with. I returned home, feeling angrier and more anxious than ever. I poured myself a drink and contemplated the situation. At some point, I assumed Brenda was making these choices on her own, and the police likely wouldn't intervene for another 24 hours. I even entertained the thought that Brenda had invited those men herself. My mind was playing tricks on me, and drinks only added to the confusion. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and dry mouth. I took a shower, got dressed, and grabbed a bottle of aspirin. After taking a few, I decided to take a few more to relieve my headache. In the mirror, I saw a man with a distressed, lost expression. After having a light breakfast, I waited around for either a phone call or Brenda's return. Around 2 o'clock, Brenda arrived, looking refreshed and wearing one of my favorite dresses, which she had only worn for special occasions. I asked her about her absence and the man who answered her cell phone. She sat down but missed the chair and ended up on the floor crying. I left for the garage, played loud music, and vented my frustration for hours. It became clear to me that Murray had caused the problems in my marriage. Before her involvement, Brenda and I were happy, but her influence had driven us apart. I feared that Brenda was seeking happiness or closeness with another man or men. In the hours I spent in my shop, I came to the realization that I had probably lost Brenda for good. We were headed for a divorce. Going into the house, I found myself alone. Brenda had left, presumably for Murray's support. I went to our bedroom and was shocked to see Brenda's dresser drawers empty. I turned to online banking to protect my financial interests. I went online to figure out how to safeguard my assets, ensuring I wouldn't suffer financially after years of building a substantial savings and bank account. Afterward, I reached out to a friend who had experienced a divorce, and we made plans to discuss Brenda and me. I informed our kids about our strained relationship and Brenda's possible departure. 1 week passed with me immersing myself in work to distract from my crumbling home life. By Saturday night, I was convinced Brenda had given up on us long before the previous week and was with someone else. I finally called Marie's house that night. She was surprised to hear that Brenda wasn't with me, as I had thought she was still upset with me and staying close to home. Marie asked if I had seen Brenda at all, expressing her concern about the situation. I replied that I believed Brenda had left us, attributing it to the fact that she had been going out with Marie every Wednesday, Friday, and sometimes on other nights. I believed this had contributed to the breakdown of our relationship. I added that I thought Brenda might be with the guy who had answered her phone last Friday night. Marie acknowledged that she knew about that night. She recounted how Brenda had returned home on Saturday afternoon, looking as though she had made an effort, and had mentioned a strange guy answering her phone. Brenda had broken down in tears, and later, when Marie came in from the garage, Brenda had packed her things and left. I concluded by blaming Marie for her part in the situation, saying that her actions had cost me my wife and warning her never to come around me again. I just wanted to shut everything out. Her, Brenda, that other man, and life in general. Furious doesn't begin to describe my feelings or thoughts. Just hearing Murray on the phone was enough to set me off. I was angry all over again. Angry and lost. My wife was off somewhere, and I had no way of fixing things. After shouting into the phone, I slammed it down so hard I broke the handset. Now, on top of everything else, I had to buy a new phone. It was a while before I decided to go to bed. As I got up, I noted that I'd been sitting right where Brenda had collapsed not so long ago. By morning, I figured I had lost out on sleep and would have been better off just staying up all night drinking. A dreary Sunday morning greeted me, and I wasn't in any mood to deal with anyone. Around noon, I heard a car pull up in our driveway. Looking out the window, I saw my son climbing out. My son questioned me about what had been happening, mentioning that his mother had come to his place a week ago, upset and crying. She wouldn't discuss anything other than the fact that I was going to leave her. I replied that I had informed him about our problems and clarified that Brenda had left me, packing her things and leaving. This was the first I had known of her whereabouts. He asked if this had been the case all along, to which I confirmed it. He inquired further about the situation, expressing concern and wondering if I intended to be rude with his mother. I explained that I had been exhausted and stressed, having had a week filled with worry and stress. My son had to make a long drive on a Sunday just to seek answers and understand why his mother had sought refuge at his place and wouldn't let him contact me. He mentioned that his mother had gone out with Aunt Murray the previous week and explained what he knew, including the missed phone call and my apparent anger. He asked why I had reacted that way. I provided additional details, explaining that after Brenda's message, I had called her cell phone and heard strange voices in the background. I recounted the conversation I had with the unknown man who answered and how he hung up on me after being informed that I was her husband. My son concluded that his mother had sugarcoated that part and asked if she had cheated on me. I admitted that I wasn't entirely sure what had happened, but Brenda had acted guilty about something. I hadn't spoken to her since Saturday afternoon, and I suggested that they needed to talk to each other. My son agreed to talk to his mother, but expressed doubts about whether she would. He invited me to come to his place and talk to her, ensuring I left any weapons behind. He emphasized the importance of resolving the situation, and he would follow me home, assuring that I would get there safely. During the drive to my son's place, I realized that I still had some love for Brenda, even if she had cheated on me. At that moment, I was willing to try to work things out with her. When we got to Mark's place, he parked and we went inside. His girlfriend was sitting with Brenda, and when I walked in, they both stood up, looking nervous. Brenda greeted me with a cautious, "Hi, Jeff. How have you been?" I felt my anger welling up as I wondered how she thought I had been. I started to lose control, barely managing to contain my anger in time. I blurted out, "How do you think I've been? You cheated." As I raised my voice, I noticed Brenda shrinking away from me. I had to pause and regain composure, saying, "I'm sorry. I've been okay, I guess. Drinking a bit too much lately. Confused about things, too." She appeared pale and anxious. The woman I loved, the woman I had spent most of my life with, was clearly apprehensive in my presence. It pained me deeply. My heart was breaking. I still held love for her, yet she feared me. I wondered if there was a chance to mend things. The young woman, presumably a guest, introduced herself as Jill and recognized me as Mark's father. She expressed a wish for better circumstances to meet. I shook her hand gently and responded, "Me too. I hope we can become better acquainted," although Mark hadn't told us about seeing anyone yet. I glanced at Mark with a subtle reprimand in my gaze. Jill suggested that Mark and she would give us some space to talk and offered assistance if things became difficult or noisy, citing the thin walls in the apartment building. Mark and Jill departed, leaving us to our own devices. I addressed Brenda, saying, "I suppose I need to explain things to you, Jeff. First of all, I'm so sorry, I really am. I inquired if she had something to apologize for and questioned if she had been involved with another man. Brenda responded, "Not exactly, I don't understand." I pressed further, saying, "Not exactly. That's somewhat like being half pregnant, dear. It wasn't just one guy, and it wasn't just once." Her revelation was a heavy blow. I was truly shocked. Learning that she had been with more than one man was nothing I could have anticipated. It was as if the person I had married years ago had completely changed. I felt lost. I asked her if she had made these choices willingly, to which she responded, "Not exactly, I was drunk. I think I had way too much to drink that night. Murray had also been pushing me for weeks to get out. I don't know. Maybe I was lonely too. I just don't know how it all came about. But suddenly, there I was on a bed with two men. Actually, it started with just one guy, but by the end, all of them were involved. Marie was there too." The enormity of her revelations hit me like a ton of bricks. I had expected to hear about her infidelity, but I hadn't anticipated multiple partners, nor had I imagined her and Marie being involved. They were sisters, for God's sake. I sat there in silence, not knowing how to respond. In just a few minutes, our conversation had ventured into her being with other men, and she didn't seem to be hiding anything from me. She must have sensed my inner turmoil. She offered, "I will tell you whatever you want to know, Jeff, if I can. Part of all that went on. I'm not sure how it came to be. I'm not sure when I became who I am now, though I don't know what made me forget my wedding vows or my husband waiting for me at home. All I do know is that at one point, I heard myself begging for more. I'm a terrible person. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve to live." Her sobs overtook her, and she collapsed. I watched her, struggling to recognize the person before me. I was too stunned to say anything. The situation was overwhelming, and I began to feel nauseated. As I provided an update, I mentioned that I had started to feel ill and even vomited. After calming down and taking a glass of water, I wiped my face and returned to the kitchen table. Brenda was in tears, crying softly. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know if things could ever be okay again. I sat down heavily, searching for the right words without getting sick again. I confronted her, asking, "So you and Murray's nights out were for scouting for men, Ben?" Brenda clarified, "No, that never happened before. We had gone to a new club. I told you that I had been drinking too much. Anyway, these guys were buying us drinks and dancing with us. They complimented us and made me feel beautiful and playful. Then the next thing I know, I called you and left the message that I was too drunk. And then we went to their place. Lately, I hadn't been paying attention to you." Frustrated, I raised my voice as she seemed to suggest that it was my fault. "Are you hearing yourself? Brenda, you're the reason. You and your sister, you haven't been letting me even try. I've tried to get you to go out with me, but you've been claiming that you and Murray needed to be together. Not only that, but you told me in the message that you were at Murray's. Brenda, you lied to me." Brenda explained, "No, at the time I thought we were going to Murray's, but the men wanted to take us to their place first, just for a minute. So one of them needed to pick something up, and we never thought it would be a problem. We ended up staying there, though. If only I hadn't thought you should have paid more attention to me, I might have been better prepared to fend off what happened." I couldn't help but raise my voice again, feeling frustrated by her insinuation that it was my fault. "I haven't been paying enough attention to you lately, again with that. God damn it. Need I remind you that you've been the one ignoring me? You're the one who has been going out with Murray every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday night. Always Murray this and Murray that. You've been pushing me away while taking up with her, to me. You're the one who has been pushing me out of your life." From the change in her eyes, it seemed like she suddenly realized she couldn't place all the blame on me for what she had done. Brenda acknowledged that she hadn't fully realized the extent of her actions until now. She admitted that I hadn't been paying much attention to her because she had been spending a lot of time with Murray, which had understandably upset me. Brenda clarified that she didn't enjoy being in this situation, even though I had previously expressed my frustration. She assured me that she had never labeled me as a derogatory term or treated me as such. She went on to explain that something within her had snapped that night, and she had discovered a newfound enjoyment in her experiences with those other men. The different tastes, textures, sizes, and combinations were intriguing to her. Brenda confessed that some of these experiences were were things she had wanted to explore with me but hadn't been able to communicate. She realized that she had become deeply engrossed in this situation and had lost me in the process. Recognizing the gravity of her actions, she expressed a deep desire to make amends. Her eyes reflected a newfound hope as she offered to do anything to rebuild our relationship. Brenda wanted to remain married, stop going out without me, and be a devoted, stay-at-home wife, willing to meet any expectations I had. I expressed my concerns about her commitment, questioning whether she would revert to her previous behavior once things settled down. I pointed out how she had driven a wedge between us by spending so much time with Murray, causing me to feel ignored and avoided. I was bewildered by my own actions and why I had allowed this to happen. As my voice grew louder and anger bubbled up within me, Mark and Jill entered the kitchen, offering a timely intervention. Mark proposed that we take a short break, allowing me to vent to Jill while he and Brenda had a conversation. During our walk, Jill empathized with my anger and acknowledged my right to feel that way. She explained that Brenda genuinely felt remorse for her actions and the potential damage to our marriage. Jill believed that drinks had played a significant role in the situation. I vented my frustration, expressing my strong desire to blame both Brenda and her sister Murray for the time they spent together and the drunken encounter they found themselves in. The resentment and anger I felt toward Brenda seemed overwhelming at that moment. Jill related a personal experience where her parents had faced a similar situation. Her mother had gotten involved with someone while out with friends, causing turmoil in her parents' marriage. Initially, Jill thought her father would be devastated or even angry enough to kick her out, but her parents had managed to work through their issues. I inquired about the current status of her parents' marriage, and Jill clarified that they had worked things out but had not necessarily stayed married. She emphasized that Brenda's actions were undoubtedly wrong on various levels, but insisted that it didn't mean she didn't still love me. Jill offered perspective on how drinks and indulgence could lead to such mistakes, often involving lowered inhibitions and peer pressure. She acknowledged that Brenda had made a mistake, but it was crucial to move forward and address the issue. Jill also highlighted the contrast in our situations, where I had remained faithful without external influences interfering with my commitment. While walking and talking with Jill, my anger gradually subsided. Her soothing manner of speaking had a calming effect on me, and I found myself willing to try and work through the uncertain future with Brenda. With a faint attempt at a cheerful tone, I asked Jill if I could return to the conversation with Brenda, even though I was still grappling with the situation and trying to contain my anger, driven by a sense of righteous indignation. Jill inquired about the state of our relationship before Marie began monopolizing Brenda's time. I admitted that, like most long-term couples, some of the initial magic had faded, but I believed we were doing relatively well. However, I acknowledged that I might not have taken Brenda out often enough, possibly taking her for granted. The presence of Murray had driven a wedge between us, making Brenda decline or get upset when I tried to spend time with her, leading to our gradual drift apart. Jill probed further, asking about the small gestures like bringing Brenda flowers, spontaneous compliments, and making love. I clarified that our bed life was fine, but acknowledged that I might not have been as romantic as I should have been. Jill emphasized the importance of keeping the romance alive and that couples should keep each other close through small gestures. Feeling defensive, I raised the possibility that Jill might be taking Brenda's side. I argued that it wasn't entirely my fault and that Brenda locked me out after she knew I was trying to make amends. I insisted that, despite my grievances, I had never considered being with another woman because I loved Brenda too much to betray her in that way. Jill encouraged me to go back and have a direct but calm conversation with Brenda. She reminded me of my own assertion that I loved Brenda too much to cheat on her. She advised me to talk things out, suggesting that love might rekindle, allowing us to move past this ordeal. Upon returning to Mark's place, I found Brenda clear-eyed and waiting for us. Brenda expressed uncertainty about our current situation, indicating her desire to be with me, but questioning whether I would accept it. I inquired about what she meant, and she admitted to her infidelity, describing it as a one-time occurrence that would never happen again. Brenda acknowledged the need for us to address her unfaithfulness and rebuild trust. She asked if I could accept her realization of the wrongdoing and sincere apologies. wondering if we could move forward from there. I conveyed my feelings to Brenda, explaining that her infidelity had hurt me deeply, especially given the circumstances in which it occurred. I mentioned that it was challenging for me to accept what had happened, particularly the involvement of multiple individuals, including her sister. I also shared my frustration with Brenda about my efforts to repair our relationship and how she had initially resisted giving me a chance. I admitted my own shortcomings, recognizing that I might not have put enough effort into our relationship. Brenda acknowledged her significant mistake and expressed remorse, acknowledging that she couldn't change the past and that all she could do was hope for my forgiveness and trust in the future. She understood that the roles reversed would be equally challenging for her. Brenda further explained that her actions that night were influenced by drinks and the allure of a deep, dark fantasy, which she regretted deeply. She expressed her apologies for losing control. I then proposed the idea of a trial separation, which caused Brenda to shed tears. I noticed that she might have expected a more severe reaction from me. I admitted that I still loved her and didn't want to lose her without a fight. However, I also realized that harboring such negative thoughts could lead to revenge, which I wanted to avoid. Jill interjected and strongly advised against a trial separation, sharing her parents' experience as an example of how it often led to divorce. She suggested that we should separate within the same house, allowing us to work through our issues together. I appreciated the wisdom in Jill's words and the potential consequences of my thoughts and actions. I questioned whether I could let Brenda back into my life and how to deal with the anger I felt. Mark expressed concern about my anger and whether Brenda would be safe around me. I acknowledged my anger and potential for bad actions. Jill emphasized that, based on her parents' experience, we needed to confront the situation together rather than separately. She recognized it wouldn't be easy, but suggested that trying to work things out within the same house might be the best way to determine the future of our relationship. I appreciated Jill's advice, but questioned whether she fully grasped the situation, and I needed time to consider our options. The week of separation had taken a toll on our relationship, and I didn't want to make a decision under pressure. I informed Brenda that I needed time to think and asked Mark to take her to a motel temporarily. I promised to give my decision the next morning. Upon my return the following day, I noticed that Brenda, Mark, and Jill appeared exhausted and somber. It was clear that none of them had rested. I knew I had to convey my decision. I suggested that Brenda should come home, albeit with a warning that I might get angry and raise my voice at times. I mentioned that we could work things out by staying in separate rooms within the same house, in our bedroom and a guest bedroom. Brenda seemed relieved but also apprehensive, and I could sense the shattered trust in our marriage. Brenda raised the idea of counseling, to which I responded that we could consider it, but we already had counselors in Mark and Jill. She clarified that she meant professional counseling, and I agreed that we should seek individual and couples counseling starting the next day. As Brenda prepared to leave with me, she inquired about my car's location. Mark volunteered to get it from the local parking garage. To our surprise, Mark revealed that he had proposed to Jill, and she accepted. We welcomed Jill into the family and wished them happiness. We left for home together, the journey filled with silence and tension, and the subsequent week was marked by anxiety. We started counseling the following week. After 8 months of counseling, we decided to move forward on our own, having worked through the pain and nightmares of the past. One day, Brenda returned from the doctor with distressing news. She was seriously ill, with cancer that had spread to various parts of her body. I tried to reassure her, but couldn't shake her sense of dread. We now faced a new challenge, dealing with Brenda's illness. Despite our efforts to remain positive, Brenda's health declined. When she passed away, she was surrounded by her children and me. I acknowledged my lingering resentment towards Marie and the time we lost in the aftermath of Brenda's mistake. Our preoccupation with that situation might have delayed the discovery of her cancer.
I've often thought about how my life has changed, from carefree youth to the responsibilities that come with age. When I was younger, I didn't think much about the future. I focused on enjoying life, hanging out with friends, and living in the moment. It wasn't until I met Wilma during my last year of college that I started to see a clearer path. She stood out, thoughtful, quiet, but with a strong inner drive that captivated me. Looking back, I realize how lucky I was to find her. Our relationship grew naturally, and soon we were inseparable. I wasn't one to rush things, but everything just felt right with her. We shared similar goals, supported each other, and built a life I was proud of. Little did I know our marriage would be tested in ways I couldn't have imagined. My name is Fred, and this is the story of a marriage that once seemed solid but began to fall apart. Wilma and I had been married for almost 25 years. On the surface, everything looked great. We had a wonderful daughter, Nancy, who was finishing college and had a job lined up in Washington, D.C. We lived in Richmond, only a couple of hours away, and were excited about the new chapter in her life. We had always seemed happy. We met in college, quickly fell in love, and I thought we shared a deep connection. Before Wilma, I had 2 girlfriends, one in high school and one in college. People always said Wilma was kind and sweet, which was true, though she had an Irish temper when she felt strongly about something. I'd been on the receiving end of that a few times and usually backed down when she was set in her ways. Over the years, we developed our routines. I worked in retail, and she had a long career in the city's codes department. She stayed home with our daughter for her first 5 years before going back to work. Despite some challenges, she enjoyed her job. My career was progressing, and we moved back to our hometown, which we loved. I had other job offers, but Wilma didn't want to leave since her mother was still in the area and getting older. Both my parents had passed away, which was tough, but Wilma, my daughter, and her mother were there for me. She loved my parents too, and it was a loss for her as well. When you've been married a long time, it's easy to start taking each other for granted. That's likely what happened with Wilma and me. With our daughter away at college and preparing to move out for good, I thought it was the perfect time to rekindle our relationship. I started taking Wilma on weekly dinner dates, hoping to bring some excitement back into our love life, which had grown a bit stale. But something felt off. After hearing so many stories about cheating wives and noticing small changes in Wilma, I started to worry. I never thought she'd jeopardize our marriage. She'd always done the right thing, and I trusted her completely. I paid the bills. She handled the household. We worked well together, and we always discussed major purchases. Working in retail, the Christmas season meant long hours for me, often 60-hour weeks as an assistant manager. Wilma, on the other hand, usually had time off during the holidays. Her department at the city always threw a Christmas party, and I made sure to attend, even with my hectic schedule, to meet her colleagues. But starting in the fall, Wilma had become more distant, not dramatically, just a little less engaged. I brushed it off, but she also started losing interest in romance. Our dates became less enjoyable for her, and our love life slowed from once or twice a week to once or twice a month. She blamed menopause and work stress, but something didn't feel right. I had occasional work trips to the corporate office, and in October I was scheduled to be gone for a week. Normally, Wilma hated it when I traveled, but this time she just said, okay. That got my attention. She didn't seem to care much about spending time together, and I asked repeatedly if she was all right. She insisted she was just tired from work. I suggested she see a doctor, and she agreed as I packed for my trip. Before I left, she told me to have fun and behave. I laughed it off since these trips were more work than fun, but it was strange. She'd never questioned my behavior before. As I thought more about Wilma's actions and words, it became clear something wasn't right. I asked if everything was okay, and she said yes. When I told her I'd miss her, she brushed it off, saying it was only 5 days. Normally, she hated sleeping alone, and suddenly I worried, maybe she won't be sleeping alone. I watched her closely over the weekend before my Sunday afternoon flight, which would bring me back Friday evening. I called her friend Beth, but she only mentioned that Wilma seemed tired. I also spoke to her coworker Sally, who revealed a new manager, Barney Rubble, had joined their department recently. Sally said the new rules were keeping everyone busier, but Wilma hadn't mentioned this to me. When I asked more about Barney, Sally hesitated, but eventually told me he was a big, intimidating man. About 35, 6'3", and over 200 pounds. He played football in college and, according to Sally, seemed to like Wilma. They went out for lunch at least once a week, but Sally hadn't noticed anything beyond that. I thanked her but asked her to keep me informed if anything seemed off with Wilma. She agreed, though it didn't make me feel much better. Now I was in full worry mode. Should I confront Wilma or gather more information? I started looking into Barney. I found that he had come from Charlotte, wasn't married, and had 2 sons. He lived about 5 miles from us in a similar neighborhood. I wondered if anyone I knew lived nearby who could keep an eye on him while I was gone. As Saturday approached, I tried to learn more about this handsome and intimidating Barney. Sally's description only made me more anxious, worrying that my wife, who was more of a follower, might be drawn to him. Even though I never had a reason to think Wilma would be unfaithful, her recent behavior made me uneasy. I called our daughter Nancy and asked if she'd noticed anything unusual about her mom. She agreed that Wilma seemed a bit distant, but didn't think it was serious. I asked if she could casually ask her mom about work without raising suspicions. Nancy agreed and promised to call me after. Meanwhile, I kept myself busy with yard work, staying close to my phone. Wilma mentioned she was going shopping alone and would be back soon. After she left, I decided to try accessing her computer, but she had changed her settings and deleted all her old and sent emails, which only increased my concern. I wished I could check her phone, but she kept it with her constantly. While packing for my trip, I considered driving by Barney Rubble's house just in case. Wilma had dressed as if she was really going shopping, but I wanted to be sure. It took me about 15 minutes to get there. I noted a Lexus with North Carolina plates in his driveway, likely his car since he had recently moved from Charlotte. The city seemed to pay its department managers well. Seeing no other cars, I headed back home. My neighbor, Tom Butcher, stopped me to chat about the neighborhood, mentioning it had been quiet lately. I told him I'd be out of town for the week and asked if he could keep an eye on the house and check on Wilma. He agreed, and I went inside. Once inside, I started laundry for my trip. I usually mix my clothes with Wilma's to make a full load, and while going through the hamper, I found some new Zexy bras and underwear I hadn't seen before. It felt like another sign of trouble in our marriage. Typically, Wilma would joke that I just didn't notice her clothes, but I was certain this lingerie was new. I checked the underwear, but found nothing unusual. Still, my mind was racing, especially since I'd given her similar black and red lingerie in the past, which she rarely wore. Now I wondered when she decided to wear these. A little later, Wilma came home, and I asked how her shopping went. She said she didn't find much, but mentioned a sale at the mall. Normally, she loved shopping, especially with my store discount, but she didn't seem enthusiastic. When I asked if she went anywhere else, she vaguely mentioned trying some new stores, which made me uneasy. Dinner was quiet. I could tell we were both thinking about the unspoken tension between us. Wilma had always been a great cook, but lately she was serving more pre-made meals, and that night was no exception. After dinner, I said I needed to get allergy medicine and asked if she needed anything. She gave me a short list, and I teased her about spending time together since I'd be gone for a few days. She dismissed the idea, saying she planned to turn in early because she hadn't slept well. So much for romance. I was frustrated. It felt like we were just roommates now. When I got back from the store, she complained about everything I bought, picking fights over the wrong paper towels and toilet paper. I realized she was trying to avoid closeness by starting an argument. I didn't say anything. She went upstairs to read, and after my shower, I got into my pajamas. She told me she was tired and headed to bed early, at just 8:30. I went downstairs to watch a football game and ended up sleeping on the couch, not wanting to go to bed with an angry wife who was clearly avoiding me. I woke up early Sunday, made coffee, and read the paper. When Wilma came down, she got ready for church, so I dressed quickly and we left together. At church, Wilma acted like her usual self, sweet and friendly with everyone. I was hoping for a sermon on fidelity, but no such luck. After the service, we headed home, but she barely spoke to me. Once home, she rushed inside, forgetting her keys, and I had to let her in. She made herself a sandwich without offering me anything, so I made my own and ate in front of the TV. She read the paper as if nothing was wrong. Her phone rang and she left the room to answer it. We didn't speak during lunch. Later, I folded the laundry and left her lingerie on the bed, wanting her to see it. When she saw it, she only said, "I hope you washed it on gentle. I'd hate for you to ruin my clothes." I was furious, ready to snap, but she left the room before I could say anything. I packed for my trip, and when she saw me bringing my suitcase downstairs, she complained, "Now I have to take you to the airport and give up my Sunday." Usually, she was happy to drive me, and we'd talk about missing each other. This time, I knew I'd never feel that way again. I told her, "Never mind, I'll drive myself. Have a great week." I was sure Wilma had plans and couldn't wait for me to leave. I walked out without saying goodbye or sharing our usual kiss. The flight to Chicago was uneventful, and I checked into my hotel. Since I was the only one from my store, I had the chance to meet new people and talk business. While I didn't like traveling, it was nice to connect with others. I didn't bother calling Wilma to let her know I arrived safely, as I usually would. There didn't seem to be a point anymore. She wasn't mine anymore. I called Nancy to tell her I'd be gone for a few days and that she could reach me on my cell. I didn't hear anything from Wilma. I was certain she was relieved to be apart from me. That evening, I had dinner with others from across the country, but I was exhausted and needed sleep after a few restless nights. In the middle of the night, I woke up in tears, finally releasing all the emotions I had kept bottled up. I realized my marriage was over unless Wilma somehow changed. I couldn't go on like this. I cried for my daughter, who would now have to split holidays between two parents, and for the years Wilma and I had spent together, mostly happy ones. Eventually, I went back to sleep and started the week of meetings. The next morning, there were no messages or texts from Wilma, nothing. As the week went on, I focused on work and started planning how to end the marriage. It was clear Wilma had emotionally checked out, and I wasn't going to get her back. I called my attorney, who said he could prepare divorce papers and that it would likely be a 50-50 split, given our similar incomes. Since Nancy's college expenses were covered, that wouldn't be an issue. I accepted that the end was near and started checking our accounts, which I usually handled. Wilma had never been involved in the finances and only cared about what she wanted to buy. Taking control of my life again felt like a small victory. Later in the week, I called my neighbor Tom to see if he'd noticed anything at our house. He told me Alexis had been picking up Wilma every morning and dropping her off each evening. I laughed bitterly and said, "Thanks for the info, Tom." Tom, always nosy, had been watching everything, and for once, I was thankful. I asked him for a favor. Keep an eye on the car, let me know how long it's there, and if possible, take some photos. I was honest with him about my suspicions, and he agreed to help, mentioning he'd gone through a tough divorce himself. By Thursday, I asked my boss if I could leave Chicago a day early, explaining something urgent had come up at home. He agreed, so I booked an early evening flight. I called Tom again, and he told me the car had been parked overnight, sending me photos with timestamps. I told him, "I owe you, Tom." As I flew home, anxiety built up about what I'd find. I knew the marriage was over, but Wilma's behavior still shocked me. How could she change so quickly? After landing, I checked my phone. Still nothing from Wilma, but Nancy had called, so I returned her call. She said, "Dad, I tried calling Mom, but she didn't answer. I left her a message to call me back." Driving home, I saw no cars in front of the house, but thought Wilma's might be in the garage. I stopped by Tom's house first. Tom greeted me and said, "The car was parked in front of your house all night, no discretion at all." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. He added that they had left around 6 a.m. and hadn't returned. I wondered if they went to Rubble's place or just out for dinner. Tom suggested I park my car on a nearby street to avoid being noticed. I agreed. Then Tom said something that made my blood boil. They looked like a happy couple, holding hands as they got into the car. I felt sick, but replied, "Thanks, Tom." He apologized for telling me, but I reassured him, my marriage is over anyway. I had to decide whether to wait for them to come back or confront Wilma right away. I called my attorney, explaining the situation. He advised waiting for a private investigator in case things got heated, but I couldn't wait. "I need to see it with my own eyes," I said. He cautioned me, but I was determined. I have to know for sure. I turned to Tom and said, "I'm going in soon. I want to catch them in the act, not just talking." Tom offered to come along, but I declined. He left the room briefly and returned with a pistol. "Just for defense, in case anything happens," he said. "I'll stay outside with my camera and phone, just in case." I appreciated Tom's help, but the reality of what I was about to do hit me hard. I walked to my house, checking the time. It was around 9 p.m. Peeking through the window, I saw Rubble kissing Wilma passionately. My heart broke, but I stayed quiet. With the curtains partially open, anyone could have seen them. Tom took a few photos. Rubble, much taller than Wilma, started undressing. He stripped down to his boxers, revealing a muscular body. Wilma stood up, grinning as he removed her blouse and pants. She wore the red lingerie I had found earlier. At that moment, any remaining hope I had was gone. Rubble picked Wilma up and carried her upstairs. I followed, quietly unlocking the back door. I heard her giggle as Rubble said, "I'm going to use you like my little Zex toy." I turned on my phone's video recorder and moved to the bedroom door, which was partially open. Rubble was unclothed, with his back to me, as Wilma lay on our bed. My emotions were a mix of anger, hurt, and numbness. As I stood in the doorway, Wilma suddenly turned and saw me. Her face changed from desire to shock in an instant. Rubble saw me and laughed. "The chicken is here. Now you can see how a real man handles your wife." I was shaking with rage, but kept my voice steady. Screw you. And her too. No one disrespects me in my own house. Rubble smirked. What are you going to do about it, cuck? I asked calmly. How big are you? He puffed up. I'm 6'3", 225 pounds, and I've got something you'll never have, a giant Johnny. I nodded, staying composed. Do you run too? Stay in shape? He looked confused, but answered, Yeah, I run. Why? Good, I said, pulling out the weapon. You'll need to outrun a bullet. Wilma screamed, and Rubble's confidence disappeared. Hey man, don't do anything crazy, he begged. Get on the floor, now! Rubble dropped to his knees while Wilma whimpered. I continued. Who decided to screw in my house, you or Wilma? He stammered. We knew you were out of town. Wilma wanted to be here in case you called. I shook my head. Brilliant. How many times have you slept with my wife? 5 times, he admitted. When was the first? Monday night, he said, panicking. Please, Wilma, tell him. Wilma, frozen in shock, nodded slightly. Put your head on the floor, I ordered, and don't move. I laughed bitterly. Your Johnny doesn't seem so big now. Not so arrogant, are you? I pointed the weapon at his lap. How about I pull the trigger? You won't die, but you won't be having fun either. Please, no, I won't touch her again, Rubble begged, starting to pee himself. Pissed yourself, huh? I mocked. I told him to get dressed, still laughing at the absurdity. You're a joke, Rubble, but don't worry, I've got it all on video. If either of you causes trouble, I'll release it. Wilma, terrified, nodded. Rubble, trembling, agreed, saying, Please don't release it. Once he was dressed, I told him to leave. I mentioned Barney Rubble before he left, saying, Don't go messing around with any more married women, okay? He nodded and walked out, leaving me alone with my unclothed, crying wife. I told her to get dressed and that we'd talk after I made some coffee. Downstairs, Tom told me he was proud of me and had heard the whole conversation. Surprised, I thanked him. He revealed that when he gave me the weapon, it only had 1 bullet, and he was ready to step in if needed. I didn't want you eliminating them both and making a mess, he said. I shivered, realizing the risk, and thanked him again. Don't hurt her, Tom warned. You'll end up in jail and your daughter needs you. Thanks, Tom, I replied, though my mind was elsewhere. A few minutes later, Wilma, now dressed, came down. I poured her some coffee, and we sat down. She tried sitting next to me on the couch, but I moved to the recliner. So, what do you have to say for yourself? I asked. Wilma began. I can't express how sorry I am for everything. You know me. I've never acted like this. I thought I knew you, I interrupted. Keep going, she continued, crying. I got caught up in the excitement and thought you'd never find out. I laughed bitterly. You were about as subtle as a freight train. Did you think I wouldn't notice? I loved you, and for 24 years, my life with you and Nancy was amazing. Then you lost your mind. Now's your chance to be honest. Lie and you're out. I knew I wasn't taking her back, but I wanted her to admit her mistakes. She nodded and said, I have no excuse. He swept me up in the moment. He was wild and intense, something I've never felt before. You're so loving and kind, but he took what he wanted. She paused, and I stared blankly at her. I know it's stupid. I acted like a teenager. Quite the date, I said. 5 Zex sessions. And don't forget the groping and lunches. Your coworkers saw it all. They know you're a strumpet. She gasped. I never thought they'd notice. Well, they did, I said. She cried more. I'm so sorry for everything. I've disgraced myself. I agree, I replied. But you also humiliated me. Your selfishness and lack of respect were unbelievable. I never imagined someone who claimed to love me would treat me this way. I began to tear up. She tried to come closer, but I stopped her. Don't come near me, I said. You've ignored me for weeks. You didn't even call me once while I was away. You were too caught up with your lover to remember the man who stood by you for 24 years. Shame on you, Wilma. I thought you'd love me until I died, for better or worse. Then I broke down in tears. I had held it together through everything, but now I couldn't stop. I thought about the future. Thanksgiving was next week, and my poor Nancy would have to split every holiday between us. Wilma had ruined it all. As angry as I was at Rubble, her betrayal hurt more because she showed no respect or love for me. In her eyes, I was weak, for always putting her needs above mine. I had sacrificed for her, cared for her when she was sick, and put her feelings first. She had been a great wife and mother, and now it was all gone. Maybe I should have treated her worse, I thought, instead of always caring about her feelings. She tried to approach me again, but I pushed her away. She grabbed my legs, crying at my feet. I needed to have this conversation for closure. I wasn't going to listen to the usual excuses. I was lonely, or he made me feel pretty. I didn't care what he said, only what she did. My heart was breaking, but I knew I'd eventually heal. After a few moments, I told her to sit back on the sofa so we could talk. Still crying, she sat down. "Wilma," I began, "I have one question. Do you love him?" "No, I don't think so," she replied. "You don't think so?" I shot back. "Are you unsure whether you love him or not?" "No, Fred, I don't love him. It was the thrill of doing something wrong. You know me. I've always been the good girl, doing what was expected. Then Barney came along and I was drawn in by his power." I shook my head. "You let it happen. Did you know it was wrong?" "What were you thinking?" I continued. "Rubble is just like those guys who take advantage of women. Except you willingly went along and treated me like I was nothing." She broke down, sobbing. No. "You enjoyed it," I accused. "Sorry I'm not as big or rough as he is. If you wanted to be treated that way, you could have told me." She cried harder. "I've never been adventurous, and I wanted to try new things. Remember when I suggested spicing things up after Nancy left? I bought toys, oils, outfits, but you refused them all. Were you waiting for the right person?" We sat in silence for a few minutes. "I'm going to take a shower," I told her, "and then we'll talk more." As I showered, I thought about everything. I knew Wilma was sorry, but it was too soon to make any decisions about our marriage. I wished I could stay in the shower forever to wash away my thoughts. When I came back downstairs, Wilma looked completely drained. While her pain was fresh, mine had been building for weeks. Finally, she spoke. "Fred, I love you and always will. I know my actions don't show it, but I'm devastated by what I did." I cut her off. "Stop it, Wilma. I know you're sorry, but if I were still in Chicago, what would you be doing right now?" She was silent. "Tell me," I demanded. She hung her head and whispered, "I'd be with Barney." "With him how? I thought we made love." "I hate the word screw," she said. "I'd be screwing Barney." "That's better," I said coldly. "At least you admit it. Now tell me everything you did." "I already know some of it, so don't lie." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We fooled around. I gave him head, and we had sex." "Nice. You wouldn't do that for me because you said it was disgusting, but you did it for him. Did you enjoy it?" She shook her head. "No, I did it because he demanded it. I don't know why I let him treat me like that. He used me." "But you liked it," I said. "I saw the lust in your eyes. I've never seen that look for me, not in 24 years. How do you think that makes me feel?" She cried harder. "I love you, and you're so loving. He was just a brute. I'm ashamed." "Do you even remember when we last had sex?" I asked. She looked confused. "A couple of weeks ago?" "No, it's been 4 weeks, around the time you started seeing Barney. Did you even notice? And when did we last make love? Was he on your mind?" She shook her head. "No, it wasn't the same with him. He just took me. We make love." "But you liked it. Just a couple of hours ago, he's all you could think about. Do you know how humiliating that is for me?" She sobbed. "I'll do anything to ease your pain. I never thought I could hurt you so badly." "Do you want to keep seeing him?" I asked coldly. "He made you feel things I never could, even if you let me try." "I don't want him, Fred. I want you," she pleaded. "I find that hard to believe," I said. "You can't change that fast. We both need sleep. I'm off tomorrow, and maybe things will be clearer after we rest." I got up and headed to our bedroom. I grabbed a few things and took them to our daughter's room. Wilma followed me, looking devastated. "I want to sleep with you," she whispered. "Our bedroom is ruined because of you and Rubble," I replied coldly. "I doubt I'll ever sleep there again. You should stay in it. You have things to do tomorrow." She looked puzzled. "What things?" "Go to the doctor and get checked," I said firmly. "Rubble probably slept with lots of women. You need to get tested for your own safety. If you slept with him before we last had sex, you need to tell me because I might need to be tested too. Also, did he talk you into using our bed? He was trying to degrade me and make me betrayed. That makes me furious. You enjoyed seeing me humiliated. Have a nice night." I slammed the door and went to bed. Wilma left and went back to our room. I tossed and turned for hours before finally falling asleep. When I got up at 7 o'clock the next morning, Wilma was already in the kitchen. She had made coffee and told me she had taken the day off. We have the whole day together, she said nervously, and I want us to talk. The thought of listening to her all day made me uneasy, but I sat down for breakfast. We ate in silence until she said, I'll get tested for STDs. I want to work through this with you. Why? I asked sarcastically. If you still want your lover and can keep it quiet, just keep seeing him. She looked shocked. You want me to keep seeing him? Isn't that what you want? I shot back. He charmed you and you loved it. You'll see him at work every day anyway. Nothing has to change. Might as well keep enjoying Big Tool if that's what you like. She stared at me, tears in her eyes, confused. Why are you saying this? I want to be with you. I think we should try a separation, I said calmly. That way you can be with Big Johnny and I can be the oblivious cuck. You get the best of both worlds, respect from friends and family and no wasted time in a fake marriage. We can act like a happy couple at events and then your lover can have you after. She began to cry as I got up to leave. Why does this stupid strumpet suddenly care about what I'm doing? I thought as I walked out. She hadn't cared for a while. While she cleaned up, I checked her phone. No calls from Barney since last night, but she could have used the landline. I left and went to talk to my boss. After explaining everything, he was shocked and sympathetic. We discussed transferring me to another store, which would mean a raise and getting out of this nightmare. He said it could happen within a month or two. Next, I went to my attorney and told him my plans. We'd move forward with a standard separation and a 50-50th split. I intended to move out within the week and wait for the transfer. I also changed all our accounts, canceled joint cards, and took out half the savings. We'd need Wilma's signature for the investments, so that would have to wait. It was straightforward, but still made me feel awful. Later, I walked through the park, trying to clear my head. Wilma called to tell me she had her doctor's appointment and would get the results in a few days. I said I'd be home soon, but needed to talk to Nancy before making any final decisions. That thought made me cry. After getting some air, I went home. The house didn't feel like a home anymore, just a place to stay. Wilma was dressed nicely and seemed nervous. We need to move forward, she said. Maybe we can fix our marriage. Okay, dear wife, I said sarcastically. Tell me how we do that. She suggested counseling, seeing less of Barney, and making more time for us. It sounded nice. When she finished, I asked, Are you willing to show me all your communications with him? I want to see everything before we move on. She looked uneasy. I deleted them. How convenient, I said. Why did you do that? I didn't want you to see them, she admitted. When did you delete them? I pressed. I wanted a fresh start. Everything that reminded me of Barney had to go, she said, thinking it was a smart move. I handed her a document. Here's the separation agreement from my attorney. If you want, have someone review it. I'll move out and keep helping with the expenses. She thought for a moment before responding. I'd rather stay together and try to fix this. I love you, and I think we can work through it. I don't, I replied, knowing I wasn't going to tell her about the transfer. She'd never move. We spent the rest of the day quietly working around the house. Wilma was busy talking to her mom about Thanksgiving and making plans to invite some friends. I didn't bother telling her I wouldn't be joining this year. We ordered pizza, ate in silence, and I kept packing to prepare for moving out. She begged me to stay until after Thanksgiving before deciding anything, and I nodded without giving her a real answer. The rest of the weekend dragged. I continued sleeping in the other room, and she again asked if she could join me. I told her no, explaining that we needed space. Monday came, and I'd taken the day off without telling Wilma. While she went to work, I moved into a temporary motel for a few days, waiting for news on my transfer. My regional boss was looking into 2 options since I was the assistant manager. The store manager, a good friend, knew this move would be financially beneficial and help me escape the toxic situation I was in. Around lunchtime, I called Wilma's office and spoke to Sally. She was hesitant to talk, but I needed to know how Wilma was behaving at work. Sally said Wilma had been very quiet and kept to herself. She also mentioned that Wilma spent about an hour in Barney's office earlier and came out looking upset. When Sally checked in later, it seemed like Wilma had been crying. Sally asked her what was wrong, and Wilma admitted she'd had a rough weekend and that things with me were difficult. When Sally asked, "Does this have anything to do with Barney?" Wilma just nodded, but didn't elaborate. I thanked Sally and decided to call Wilma. After waiting a bit, I called to see if I could pick up on anything suspicious. When she answered, I asked, "Are you at lunch?" "Yes," she replied, with the noise of people talking in the background, likely a restaurant. "Are you alone?" I pressed. "Yes," she said, just grabbing lunch and heading back. I wanted to believe her, but I called Sally again. Sally told me Wilma had only been gone about 25 minutes, so maybe she was telling the truth. But Sally also mentioned Wilma had gone into Barney's office for another 30 minutes after lunch. I thanked her again, moved more clothes to the motel, and spent the rest of the day trying not to think about Wilma. By the time Wilma got home around 5 o'clock, I had made up my mind to tell her I had moved out. When she arrived, I sat her down and said, "We need to talk. I've moved out, and I think we should live separately for a while to figure out what's next." She looked shocked. "Fred, I don't want that. I think we should stay together and work this out." "How? How can we work this out? Maybe we need time apart to see if we even still want this marriage." "No," she replied, even more shocked. "I don't want a divorce. Not at all." "Wilma, since I confronted Barney, have you spoken to him?" She hesitated before answering. "Yes, but we were just talking about how to work together, that's all." "Please, Fred, don't do this. Let's just get through Thanksgiving first. It could help us both." "I'm sorry," I said, softening a bit. "But I love Nancy, and I think you still want Barney. It's too painful to be second best to my wife. We need to talk to Nancy and tell her we've separated." Tears filled her eyes. "Please, Fred, don't tell her. Not yet." "She needs to know," I insisted. "We can't hide this from her." I stood up. "I should go. I'll be in touch." I hugged her briefly, and she cried as I left. Back at the motel, I settled in and worked on a few things. I told Wilma she could call if anything important came up, but otherwise we needed space. That night, I barely slept, tossing and turning with everything weighing on me. The next day, I went to work, throwing myself into the holiday rush. With Black Friday around the corner, it was busy, which helped distract me from my personal turmoil. When I got back to the motel around 7 o'clock, I checked my phone. There was a text from Wilma saying she loved me. I scoffed, thinking sarcastically, "Wilma who?" Later, she called. I answered. "Thanksgiving dinner is at noon," she said, sounding hopeful. "Nancy is coming home tomorrow, and we've invited about 10 people. What time will you be there?" I took a deep breath. "I won't be coming, Wilma." There was silence on the other end, and then she hung up. After that, I called Nancy and told her the truth. Her mom and I had separated. She started crying, and I explained that her mom had been seeing someone else. I didn't go into all the details, but I had to be honest. "I didn't cause this," I told her. "Your mom did." She begged me to come to Thanksgiving, saying her mom would be heartbroken if I didn't. I told her I couldn't. I was too hurt, but I promised to take her out and spend time with her over the weekend. She was upset, but she understood. I explained that work would be intense with Black Friday, and I'd have to be at the store by 5 a.m. working until nearly 8 p.m. "I just wish you'd try to fix things with Mom," she said, sounding desperate. "I wish I could too," I replied, but I just didn't have it in me. After that call, I barely slept. The upcoming holiday season was shaping up to be the worst I'd ever had. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving was always hectic at the store. I worked a 12-hour shift and returned to my motel completely drained. I had missed calls from both Nancy and Wilma. I called Nancy first. She told me she had spoken with her mom, and Wilma had admitted to some inappropriate behavior, but insisted she never stopped loving me. Nancy was upset with me for not coming to Thanksgiving, but I couldn't bring myself to go back to that house. Later, I called Wilma. She was furious, demanding to know why I wasn't attending Thanksgiving. "You're ruining everything. Nancy will be so disappointed, and it's all your fault," she said. I sighed. "I just don't feel comfortable in a home where my wife entertained another man." "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "You're her father. Of course. You're welcome." "Is Barney coming?" I asked coldly. She hung up on me. Feeling exhausted, I called Wilma's friend Beth. I didn't want to ruin her holiday, but I needed to set the record straight. Beth had been invited to our Thanksgiving dinner, so I told her I wouldn't be there. She was shocked and asked why, so I told her the truth. Wilma had been seeing someone else, and I had caught her. "I can't believe it," Beth said, clearly surprised. "It's true," I replied, "but I don't want to spoil your holiday. I hope you have a great day." Thanksgiving morning was sunny, but I wasn't in the mood to celebrate. Alone in my small motel room, I ate a ham and cheese sandwich, thinking about families gathering for big turkey dinners. I remembered past Thanksgivings we had shared and began to cry. My life felt like it was falling apart, but I knew I had to move forward. I had the TV on for company, but it felt like I was stuck in a prison. Nancy called around 4 o'clock, saying she was coming over to spend some time with me. When she arrived, we both cried as I hugged her tightly. She told me she had stayed up most of the night with her mom, who had admitted to making a mistake but hadn't shared all the details. "Mom's a mess," she said. "She cried for 2 hours and dreaded seeing everyone without you there. When she told them you two had separated, everyone was shocked. She didn't want to answer any questions but said she's working toward fixing things." It sounded like a somber Thanksgiving, and Wilma's mom was furious, determined to get to the bottom of things. Nancy and I had a quiet dinner together, talking about school, her friends, and future plans. She had a boyfriend I hadn't met yet, and she thought he might be the one. That made me happy, but also a little sad. She couldn't wait to graduate and start her first job. I told her about my possible transfer, but asked her not to tell her mom yet. She realized that if I got the transfer, I'd never get back with Wilma since Wilma would never move. After dinner, Nancy kissed me and left. Black Friday was grueling. I arrived at the store by 5:30 a.m., and we opened at 7 o'clock. It was chaos. 2 employees didn't show up, a computer crashed, and there were constant complaints about items being out of stock. It felt like I was jumping from one crisis to the next, both at work and in my personal life. When I finally finished around 8 p.m., I returned to my motel, exhausted. I had 10 messages, 1 from Wilma, 2 from Nancy, 5 from Wilma's mom, 1 from Beth, and 1 from my regional manager. I called my manager first. He had good news. The store manager in Savannah was retiring, and he thought I'd be a good fit to replace him. I told him I'd love to talk about it, but the position wouldn't open up until after the new year. I thanked him and looked forward to the opportunity. Next, I called Nancy. She was excited because her boyfriend was coming to town on Saturday, and we planned to go out to dinner. After that, I called Wilma. She said Thanksgiving went okay, but people kept asking about me. "It was your choice not to be there," she said angrily. "And I'm furious that you told Nancy I had taken a lover. That's not true. You're my lover, and I made one mistake." "Don't downplay what you did, Wilma. I didn't cause this mess," I said before ending the call. Lastly, I called my mother-in-law. She had always been kind to me, and I was nervous about talking to her. She wanted to know everything, and I didn't hold back. She listened carefully and then told me not to make any hasty decisions and that she loved me. As dinner with Nancy and her boyfriend approached, I tried to stay positive. When we finally met, her boyfriend Mark was respectful and polite. We had a pleasant dinner together, and then out of the blue, Mark asked me, "Would you allow me the honor of asking for Nancy's hand in marriage?" Nancy smiled, and I could feel my eyes well up. "I'd be proud," I said, trying to hold back tears. Mark was a good young man with a bright future, and seeing Nancy so happy lifted my spirits, even if just a little. They hadn't told anyone yet, but they were planning to announce it soon. Later that night, I hugged Nancy tightly. "You and Mark are the bright spots in my life," I told her. "I'm so happy for you." After that moment, I knew the holidays would still be tough, but at least I had something positive to focus on. Work continued to consume most of my time, which kept my mind off Wilma. I arrived at the store early each day and came home late, collapsing into bed. Wilma had called a few times, but for the most part, she left me alone. I didn't know much about what she was up to, and while I was curious, I wasn't about to ask. One afternoon, Wilma called to check in. "How are you?" she asked. "Busy," I responded shortly. "I miss you," she said. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I'm hoping we can work things out." I stayed silent. "There's a Christmas party for work this weekend," she went on, "and I'm not sure if I should go without you. I miss you, Fred. This will be the first Christmas party I've gone to without you." I sighed, knowing she was trying to tug at my emotions. "I don't know what to tell you, Wilma. I've got a lot of work, and I'm swamped." She shifted the conversation to Christmas shopping. "I've been getting things ready for Nancy's presents, and I'll make sure she has everything she needs. Can you help cover some of the costs?" "Of course," I said, keeping the conversation neutral. "Okay, I've got to go now. I'll talk to you later," she said before hanging up. A few minutes later, my phone rang again, this time from Wilma's mother. She sounded pleasant, but had a serious tone. "Fred, I need to speak with you in person," she said firmly. "When can I see you?" I knew this talk was inevitable. "How about tomorrow night at 9 o'clock?" I suggested. "No," she insisted. "I need to see you now." I dreaded what was coming, but agreed. "I'll be there shortly." I pulled into her driveway around 9:15. She greeted me with a hug. "I'm exhausted," I admitted, "but I'm here." We sat in her living room, and she got straight to the point. "Fred, you need to talk to Wilma. She's been a wreck without you." I sighed deeply. "I get it, but this isn't a good time. I'm working long hours and barely have any free time." Just then, the front door opened and Wilma walked in. I hadn't seen her since before Thanksgiving, and I felt a flood of mixed emotions. She looked a bit thinner, but still beautiful. My heart raced, but then anger quickly took over. "Calm down, dear," Wilma's mother said gently. "This won't take long." Wilma rushed over and hugged me tightly around my waist. "Fred," she began, "I know I hurt you, but I'm trying to make things right. I've been seeing a counselor, and it's helping me understand our issues. I want you to take me to the Christmas party. Please. I'm begging you. It's for my job, and they like to see couples. It could help me at work." "Wilma, you know I'm working insane hours right now. It's really hard to get away," I said, keeping my tone even. "Won't it be awkward if I'm there with you? I'm sure Barney would love to humiliate me again." "Barney's an idiot. I don't care about him. I care about you," she pleaded. "Please, Fred, there's dinner and a dance. You can leave after dinner, but just promise me one dance. Please, just one." I didn't know how I kept ending up in these situations. "Fine," I muttered. "I'll think about it." She smiled and kissed me on the cheek, and I stood up to leave. Wilma's mother gave me a hug as I left. "Please give her another chance," she whispered. "She's lost without you." "I'll think about it," I replied, heading back to the motel. The party was set for the next Saturday at the Marriott. Cocktails at 6 o'clock, dinner at 7 o'clock, and dancing from 8:30 until midnight. I checked my work schedule, and it looked like I could make it, at least until around 8:30. Still, I wasn't sold on the idea. A few days later, I called my attorney and asked him to have the paperwork ready if I wanted to move forward. I also asked if he knew a private investigator, and he recommended a guy named Phil. I contacted Phil and explained everything, including how I had agreed to give Wilma one last chance, mainly for Nancy's sake and her mother's. Phil agreed to follow her for the week leading up to the party. Wilma texted me throughout the week saying she loved me and couldn't wait to see me at the party in my tux. Since I hadn't committed yet, I replied, "I haven't decided if I'm going." By Friday, Phil called me with updates. He had been tailing Wilma and observing her interactions. She'd gone out to lunch with Barney one day, but they acted professionally, nothing romantic. He also mentioned that Barney stopped by her house one afternoon for about 10 minutes, but nothing suspicious happened. Still, knowing Barney had been at my house made my blood boil. On Friday night, Phil sent me another update. Wilma just left work and went to Barney's house. She's been there since 5:30. A pizza was delivered around 6:15. It was now 8:30, and I felt sick to my stomach. I knew this was the final straw. Even if I had been considering giving her another chance, this erased any possibility of reconciliation. I asked Phil if he could get any pictures, and he said he'd try. I closed the store at 10 o'clock that night, and it usually took about an hour to wrap things up. I was in turmoil, knowing whatever hope remained was now gone. Around 11:15, Phil sent me some pictures. While there weren't any intimate shots, it showed them hugging and sitting close together in Barney's living room. I decided to call Wilma. It rang, and when it went to voicemail, I left a message asking her to call me back. A few minutes later, she did. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, sounding concerned. "I won't be able to make it to the party tomorrow night," I said flatly. She sounded disappointed. "Why not? I bought a new dress and really wanted you to see it." "I know you're with Barney," I said coldly. "Tell him to screw off. I hope you're enjoying his Johnny." I hung up before she could respond. When I got back to the motel, Phil texted me again. "Wilma left Barney's house right after your call," he reported. The next morning, I felt more at peace than I had in a while. It was cold and bright outside, and even though my life was still a mess, I had finally made a decision. I called Nancy to tell her I wasn't going to get back together with her mom. "She's still seeing Barney," I explained. "I can't do this anymore." Nancy was disappointed, but she understood. "Mom said she hadn't seen him outside of work and wouldn't ever again," she said, sounding frustrated. "I'm sorry, but it's over," I told her. Next, I called my mother-in-law and told her the same thing. She was furious and apologized for her daughter's behavior. "I'm sorry I raised her like this," she said. "I can't believe she's still seeing that man." "I appreciate your support over the years," I told her. "But this is the end for me." Later, I checked my phone and saw 5 missed calls and about 10 texts from Wilma, all saying nothing happened at Barney's house. "We just had pizza and talked," she insisted. "Please believe me." I finally texted back, "Barney has won. Don't contact me anymore. I'll send the divorce papers on Monday." Work carried on as usual, and I finally had a plan for the future. I called Sally at Wilma's work one last time. "This is the last time I'll bother you," I promised. Thanks for everything. She told me about the Christmas party. Wilma was quiet, she said. She mostly stayed with the girls, danced with a few guys, and yes, she danced with Barney once, but she didn't look happy. Did she mention me at all? I asked. She said you two were probably getting a divorce and then started crying, Sally told me. Thanks again, Sally, I said. Take care and have a great Christmas. That night, Nancy came over and we had a quiet dinner in my motel room. We were both feeling down, but just seeing her lifted my spirits. She told me her mom was miserable and they had been arguing over her lifestyle and how she treated me. Mom cried most of the night, Nancy said. I told her you're getting a transfer and leaving the area after the new year. She broke down saying she was wrong about everything. She always thought you two would get back together. That's not happening, I told her firmly. I'm moving on. Nancy also told me Wilma had received the divorce papers. She put them down and hasn't touched them since they arrived, she said. Tell her to just sign them, I said. It's time to move on. Almost 2 years have passed since that awful time in my life. I've settled in Savannah and am happier than I've ever been. My wonderful daughter Nancy is married to Mark and they live in Northern Virginia. She loves her job and hopes to start a family in a few years. Wilma sold the house and I got my half of the proceeds. At first, she tried to fight the divorce, but it was pointless. She never dated Barney after our split. He moved on to his next conquest, a married woman, which eventually cost him his job after sexual maltreatment claims. Even Wilma testified against him. Nancy keeps me updated on her mom. Wilma dates occasionally, but is unhappy. She mostly stays in her condo, telling Nancy she made a huge mistake and will never forgive herself. She still says she loves me, but knows I'll never take her back. She sent me a long apology letter, as her counselor advised, but I never responded. Wilma hasn't called in a long time. The last time she asked, "Is there anything I can do to get you back or for you to forgive me?" I told her, "I don't think so." Now, I've started dating again. I've met some wonderful women and am taking it slow. For the first time in a long while, I feel content.